My daughter's fiancé told me we only want important people at our wedding. I hung up the phone, said nothing, and made a few quiet calls. 15 venues canceled. By the time the sun rose over the Hamptons the next morning, an $800,000 wedding had vanished into thin air, leaving behind only chaos, a mountain of unpaid lobster, and a lesson my family would never forget. If you are listening to this, like and subscribe to hear how a retired old man taught a masterclass in respect. My name is Jackson. I am 72 years old, and this is how I dismantled my own daughter's perfect day without ever leaving my armchair. It was 9 o'clock on a Friday night. The air inside my small suburban house in New Jersey was stale thick with the smell of mothballs and old dust. I was standing in the living room, pressing a steam iron against my navy blue suit. It was the same suit I had worn to my wife's funeral 10 years ago. The fabric was thinning at the elbows, and the style was at least 2 decades out of date, but I had polished the buttons until they shined. I wanted to look presentable. I wanted to make Brittany proud. The wedding was tomorrow. A destination wedding at the most exclusive resort in the Hamptons. The kind of place where a glass of water costs more than my monthly electric bill. I had just finished creasing the trousers when the phone on the side table rang. The screen lit up with the name Lance. Lance was my daughter, Brittany's fiancé, a man who called himself a tech entrepreneur, but whose eyes shifted like a cornered rat whenever I asked him about his business model. I picked up the phone expecting a last-minute request. He needed me to bring something I had forgotten. "Hello, Lance," I said, my voice raspy from disuse. "Jackson. Listen, we have a situation." Lance did not say hello. He did not ask how I was. His voice was smooth, polished, and utterly devoid of warmth. I stopped ironing. The steam hissed in the quiet room. "What kind of situation?" "Lance," I asked, "is Brittany okay?" "Oh, she is fine. She is great." Lance let out a short, nervous laugh. "Look, Jackson, we have been reviewing the guest list. The RSVP list is tight. We have a lot of investors coming in from Silicon Valley and London. Big players, VIPs. You understand, right?" I did not understand. I gripped the handle of the iron tighter. "What are you saying, Lance?" I asked. The line went quiet for a second. Then Lance sighed, the sound of a man burdened by having to explain complex things to a simpleton. "Look, Jackson, we only want important people at the ceremony and the reception. It is a networking opportunity as much as a wedding. And to be brutally honest, your aesthetic, it just does not fit. The suit, the old car, the whole vibe. It is going to distract the investors. We cannot have that. We need perfection. So stay home. We will send you some photos after the honeymoon. It is for the best." The words hit me like a physical blow. It was not just the insult. It was the casual cruelty of it. Important people. He was telling me the man who raised the bride was not important enough to see her say "I do." I stood there frozen. My heart hammering against my ribs, a slow, dull rhythm. But I needed to hear one more thing. I needed to know. If this was just Lance or if my blood was involved, "Is Brittany there?" I asked, my voice low. Lance hesitated. "Yeah, she is right here getting a massage." "Do you want me to put her on?" I said. "Just ask her if she agrees." I heard muffled movement on the other end of the line, Lance covering the microphone. I heard his voice muffled and urgent. And then I heard her daughter, Brittany, my little girl. Her voice was clear, drifting through the background. "Do not be too harsh, babe. Just tell him the shuttle bus is full or something. Tell him it is a logistics issue. I do not want a scene he will understand. He is used to being left out." The phone felt heavy in my hand. She did not even have the courage to tell me herself. She was letting this man, this fraud, dismiss her father like a hired servant who had shown up in the wrong uniform. I felt a coldness spread through my chest. It was not anger, it was something deeper, something final. It was the death of an illusion I had spent 40 years protecting Brittany. making sure she never felt the cold wind of reality giving her everything she asked for. And this was the result. I realized in that moment that I had not raised a daughter, I had raised a parasite. "Okay, Lance," I said, my voice steady, calm, almost bored. "You are right. I do not want to ruin the aesthetic. Have a wonderful wedding, Jackson." "Great. Glad you are being reasonable. We will catch up in a few weeks." Lance hung up. The line went dead. I placed the receiver back in its cradle very gently. I looked at the navy blue suit hanging on the doorframe. It looked pathetic. A costume for a man who did not exist anymore. I unplugged the iron. I walked to the kitchen and poured myself a glass of cheap bourbon. The liquid burned my throat, grounding me. I sat down at my scarred oak dining table and turned on the small desk lamp. In the center of the table sat a checkbook. It was open. The top check was torn out, waiting to be mailed on Monday morning. It was made out to Lance Sterling for $800,000. It was the final payment. The reimbursement I had promised to cover the entire cost of the wedding, because Lance had said his liquidity was tied up in offshore accounts. He had booked everything on credit, promising the vendors that his wealthy father-in-law would settle the accounts upon completion. They believed him because, despite my old car and my small house, my name still carried weight in the right circles. Circles Lance knew nothing about. I picked up the check. I looked at the zeros. $800,000, my life savings, the money I made when I sold my logistics trucking empire 15 years ago. I had kept the money secret, living like a pauper, so Brittany would learn to be independent, but I had failed. She had found the bank statements years ago in my safe, and since then, she had treated me not as a father, but as an ATM. And now the ATM was being told it was too ugly to be seen in public. I took a lighter from my pocket. I lit the corner of the check. I watched the paper curl and blacken the blue ink, bubbling until the $800,000 turned into ash in the ashtray. I did not cry. I did not scream. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small, leather-bound notebook. It was old, the leather cracked and worn. Inside were phone numbers written in fountain pen. Numbers of men and women who ran the industries that made this country move. People who remembered Jackson, the ghost of logistics. People who owed me favors. I looked at the clock. It was 9:15 p.m. The wedding was in 14 hours. It was time to make some calls. The first number I dialed belonged to Marcus O'Connell. Marcus owned the Sapphire Dunes Resort, the very place where my daughter was currently getting a massage on my dime. Marcus and I went back 30 years. I had saved his hotel chain from bankruptcy during the 2008 crash by deferring his shipping costs for 2 years. He picked up on the second ring. "Jackson," his voice boomed warm and loud. "I thought I would see you at the bar tonight. Where are you hiding?" "The scotch is on me, Marcus," I said, my voice flat. "Listen to me very carefully. We have a code 0. The line went silent. Code 0 was a term from our old days. It meant total shutdown. It meant abort mission immediately. "Jackson," Marcus whispered, his tone dropping all conviviality. "What happened? Did someone die?" "Not yet," I said, taking a sip of my bourbon. "But the wedding is off." "What do you mean off, Jackson?" "The guests are here. The bride is in the spa. The lobster is being prepped." "I do not care, Marcus. The funding is pulled. I am exercising the cancellation clause in my contract. Subsection 4, paragraph B, force majeure, due to withdrawal of financial backing. Effective immediately, but Jackson." Marcus stammered, "This is an $800,000 event. If you pull the plug, now the cancellation fees alone will be astronomical, and the reputation hit." "Listen, Marcus," I cut him off. "You know, I never bluff. Lance told me tonight that I am not important enough to attend. He kicked me out. He thinks the wedding is paid for. He is wrong. The vendors are expecting payment tomorrow morning upon completion. If I do not pay, nobody gets paid. Do you want to be left holding a bill for $200,000 in catering alone? Shut it down. Shut it all down. Evict them if you have to. But do not serve a single shrimp cocktail on my dime." There was a long pause, then I heard the steel in Marcus's voice, the tone of a businessman realizing he was about to be stiffed by a fraud. Understood, Jackson. I will notify security. The ballroom remains locked. I will cut power to the reception hall. I appreciate it, Marcus, I said. I will cover your staff's wages for the night. I do not want the workers to suffer, but Lance and Brittany, they get nothing done. Marcus hung up one down. I turned the page of my notebook. The next number was for Elena Russo, the owner of the most exclusive event planning company in New York. She was the one who had sourced the 5,000 rare orchids. Brittany demanded orchids that had to be flown in from Thailand. Elena owed me because I was the one who cleared her import containers through customs when nobody else could move them. I dialed Elena. Hello, Jackson. Is everything all right for tomorrow? No, Elena, I said. The wedding is canceled. Do not deliver the flowers. Do not set up the lights. But the flowers are already in the vans. Jackson, they are en route. Turn them around. Donate them to a hospital or a funeral home. I do not care. But if one petal touches the floor of that resort, I will not pay the invoice and tell the band to go home, Jackson. Elena sounded horrified. Brittany will be devastated. She has been planning this for a year. Brittany should have thought about that before she decided her father was too embarrassing to be seen. Elena, now silence. Then a soft, okay, Jackson. I am turning the trucks around. I hung up. I took another drink. The house was quiet, but inside my head, I could hear the machinery of destruction grinding into gear. I was not a violent man. I did not use fists. I used logistics. I used supply chains. I used the flow of money, and I was cutting off the flow. There was one more call to make, the most important one. I dialed a number that went directly to the private wealth division of Chase Manhattan Bank. It was late, but for clients with my level of hidden assets, there was always someone awake, Mr. Vance. A smooth voice answered. How can we assist you tonight? I need to put a stop order on all subsidiary cards attached to my primary account, specifically the Onyx card issued to Brittany Vance, and I want to freeze the joint. Checking account she has access to. Effective immediately. Sir, if we freeze the cards, any pending transactions will be declined. The user will be stranded if they are traveling. That is the point, I said. Freeze. Flag it for fraud. If she tries to use it again, I want that card to be a worthless piece of plastic within 10 seconds. Understood, Mr. Vance. It is done. Is there anything else? No. That will be all. I placed the phone on the table. My hands were steady. I looked around my living room. The peeling paint, the old rug, the silence. It was a humble life by choice. I had stayed here to keep my feet on the ground. But my daughter had mistaken humility for weakness. She had mistaken silence for stupidity. She thought the money came from Lance. She thought I was just the old man who signed the papers she put in front of him. She never asked where the money came from. She never asked how a retired truck dispatcher could afford a wedding that cost more than a small island. She just took. I poured the last of the bourbon into my glass. It was 10:00 p.m. The calls were made. The dominoes were aligned. Now all I had to do was wait. I sat in my armchair, the darkness of the room wrapping around me like a blanket. Did not turn on the TV. I did not read. I just sat there staring at the wall, imagining the scene that was about to unfold 60 miles away. At 10:15, my cell phone lit up. It vibrated against the wood of the table. The screen flashed. Brittany calling. I watched it ring. The light pulsed in the dark room. I did not touch it. It rang until it went to voicemail. Then it rang again and again. Then a text message popped up. Dad, my card isn't working. The hotel says there is a problem with the room deposit. Call me ASAP. I smiled. A cold, humorless smile. The first domino had fallen. She was at the front desk, trying to check in some VIP or maybe order champagne, and the card had bounced. She was embarrassed. She was confused, but she was not scared yet. Not really. She thought it was a glitch, a banking error. She thought Daddy would fix it. The phone rang again. This time it was Lance, Dad. Pick up the phone. The vendors are acting crazy. The florist just called and said the trucks are turning around. What is going on? Call me now. Dad. I watched the screen flash. Lance calling Dad. Now I was Dad. 10 minutes ago, I was Jackson, the embarrassment. Now that the money was drying up, I was Dad again. I let it ring. By 11 o'clock, the messages were coming in a torrent. Dad, the resort manager just locked the ballroom. He says the event is canceled due to non-payment. Dad, pick up Dad. This isn't a funny. Dad, please. I sat there like a statue. I imagined the panic in the lobby of the Sapphire Dunes. I imagined Lance sweating in his expensive linen shirt, yelling at the staff, waving his arms, trying to look important. I imagined Brittany crying, her mascara running, ruining her pre-wedding glow. The guests, the VIPs from Silicon Valley and London, watching from the bar, whispering, wondering why the groom's credit card was declined. At midnight, the landline in the kitchen started ringing. They were calling the house phone now. I stood up, walked into the kitchen, and pulled the cord out of the wall. The ringing stopped. Silence returned. I walked back to my chair. The cell phone was still buzzing, dancing across the table with the intensity of the incoming calls. I turned it off completely. I watched the screen go black. I was alone. The house was quiet, but outside I could feel the storm gathering. I knew what would happen next. They would come here. They would drive through the night, fueled by rage and panic, to confront the old man. They would pound on my door, demanding answers, demanding money, demanding their perfect day back. But they would find the door locked. They would find the old man was not the pushover they thought he was. I leaned back and closed my eyes. I needed to rest. I needed my strength. Because tomorrow was not going to be a wedding day. It was going to be a war, and I intended to win. I woke up at 6 a.m. The sun was streaming through the dusty blinds, casting stripes of light across the floor. I felt refreshed. I stood up, stretched my stiff back, and went to the kitchen to make coffee. I brewed it strong, black, no sugar. As the coffee dripped, I looked out the front window. My house sat on a small hill overlooking the driveway. At the bottom of the hill, parked haphazardly on the lawn, was a white Range Rover. It was Lance's car. It must have arrived in the middle of the night. I saw movement inside. The doors flung open. Lance stepped out. He looked like a wreck. His shirt was untucked, his hair wild. He was marching up the driveway, his face twisted in a snarl. Brittany followed him. She was still wearing a white silk robe from the spa, now stained with mud at the hem. She looked pale, her eyes swollen from crying. They stormed up to my front porch and started pounding on the door. Bam, 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 Jackson, open this door, open this goddamn door right now. Lance screamed. I took a sip of my coffee. It was hot, bitter, perfect. I walked to the door and unlocked it. I opened it, just a crack, leaving the security chain on. I looked out at them. Lance was red-faced, panting. Brittany was shaking Dad. She sobbed. Dad, why? What did you do? Everything is ruined. The guests are there. The gates are locked. They put up a sign. Dad, a sign saying event canceled due to lack of funds. It is humiliating. Lance pushed his face into the crack of the door, spitting as he yelled, You senile old fool! Fix this call! Marcus, call the bank right now, or I swear to God I will. I looked him dead in the eye. I thought you only wanted important people, Lance, I said calmly. Lance froze. The realization hit him. His eyes widened. Important people pay for things. Lance, important people have contracts. I am just the old man with the bad suit. I am nobody. Remember, I tried to close the door, but Lance threw his shoulder against it, straining against the chain. Listen to me, you bitter old man. You are ruining $1 million deal. These investors are my future. If this wedding doesn't happen, I am dead. Do you hear me? Dead. He was not talking about embarrassment anymore. There was real fear in his voice, primal fear, $1 million deal. So that was it. The wedding wasn't about love. It was a show, a Potemkin village designed to lure investors into whatever scam Lance was running. "We don't need your money," Brittany screamed, pushing Lance aside, trying to reach through the gap. "We just need you to co-sign," the bank said. "They need your authorization to unfreeze the accounts. Just sign the paper, Dad, please, I love you." "Don, to do this," I looked at my daughter. She was desperate, she was pleading, but she was still lying. She didn't love me, she loved the access I gave her. She loved the lifestyle I subsidized. She was willing to throw me in the trash to impress strangers, but now she was on her knees begging for a signature. "No," I said simply. "I am done, Brittany. The bank is closed, the hotel is closed, and the bank of Dad is permanently closed. Go home. Go tell your important people that the show is over." I slammed the door shut. I heard Lance scream a curse word and kick the wood, but the door held. I slid the deadbolt home. I walked back to the kitchen and sat down. The coffee was still hot. Outside, I could hear them arguing. Lance was yelling at Brittany, blaming her, calling her useless. Brittany was crying, screaming back that it was his fault for insulting me. I listened to the sounds of their marriage disintegrating before it had even begun. It was music to my ears, but I knew this wasn't over. Lance was desperate, and desperate men do dangerous things. I saw him through the window, pacing by his car on his phone, talking fast, gesturing wildly. He wasn't calling a wedding planner. He was calling someone else, someone who looked like trouble. I picked up my notebook again. I turned to the page marked security. I dialed the number for a man named Butch. Butch ran a private security firm that specialized in protecting high-value cargo from hijackers. He was big, he was mean, and he owed me his career to Butch, I said, watching Lance through the blinds. "It is Jackson. I have a situation at my residence. I need a perimeter, 2 men armed standby for escalation. I am on my way," Jackson Butch said immediately. ETA, 10 minutes. I hung up. The morning was just beginning, the wedding was gone, the money was gone, but the war was just heating up. Lance was still on my lawn, and he looked like a man who had nothing left to lose except his life. And judging by the look in his eyes, he was thinking about taking mine instead. I poured another cup of coffee and waited for the fireworks to start. This was going to be a long day. The coffee shop across the street from the Sapphire Dunes Resort was called The Daily Grind. It had tinted windows and served a decent dark roast. I sat at a small table in the back corner. A newspaper spread out in front of me, though I was not reading a single word. My eyes were fixed on the street. It was 10 in the morning. The sun was high and bright, the kind of perfect Hamptons weather that brides pray for. The sky was a piercing blue without a single cloud to mar the horizon. It was a beautiful day for a wedding. It was also a beautiful day for a disaster. I took a sip of my coffee. The ceramic mug felt warm in my hands, grounding me. I watched as the first limousine turned off the main highway and approached the resort's grand entrance. It was a stretch. Hummer white and obnoxious, followed closely by a sleek black Bentley. These were the important people Lance had been so desperate to impress. The investors from Silicon Valley. The venture capitalists from London. The people who were supposed to witness his ascent into the elite. They slowed down as they approached the massive wrought iron gates. The gates were closed. A heavy chain was wrapped around the center bars, secured with a padlock the size of a fist. But it was the sign that drew the eye. It was not a polite handwritten note. It was a large industrial sandwich board painted in stark red letters, standing right in the middle of the driveway. It read, "Private event canceled, due to financial default, no entry." I watched the brake lights flare red. The Hummer stopped. The Bentley swerved slightly to avoid hitting it. A driver in a chauffeur's cap got out, looking confused. He walked up to the gate, shook it, and read the sign. He pulled out his phone, making a call. I could see him gesturing wildly, pointing at the chain. Behind him, more cars were piling up. A line of Mercedes, Porsches, and Teslas began to clog the exclusive entrance road. Horns started to honk. At first, polite little beeps, then long, aggressive blasts of frustration. This was the traffic jam of Lance's dreams. The concentration of wealth he had curated so carefully was now stuck on a public road, staring at a sign that essentially called him broke. I felt a cold, hard satisfaction settle in my gut. It wasn't happiness. It was the feeling of a balance sheet finally zeroing out. Then I saw them. The white Range Rover sped down the opposite lane, bypassing the line of confused guests driving on the wrong side of the road. Lance was driving. He looked like a madman leaning on the horn, trying to force his way to the front. Brittany was in the passenger seat. I could see her silhouette flailing her arms, screaming at him to go faster. They screeched to a halt right in front of the Hummer, nearly clipping its bumper. Lance threw his door open. He stumbled out onto the asphalt. He was wearing a tuxedo, but his tie was undone and his shirt was wrinkled. He looked like he hadn't slept in a week. He ran to the gate, grabbing the iron bars and shaking them with all his strength. "Open up," he screamed, his voice cracking. "Open this gate, Marcus. I know you are in there. Open the damn gate." Nobody answered. The resort looked abandoned. The fountains were turned off. The landscaping lights were dark. The only movement was a single security guard standing about 50 yards back, arms crossed, wearing mirrored sunglasses. He didn't even flinch as Lance rattled the gates like a caged animal. Brittany got out of the car. She was wearing a white cocktail dress, likely her reception outfit, and her hair was pulled back in a severe bun. Her face was a mask of running, mascara and splotchy red rage. She marched up to the sign and kicked it. The sandwich board clattered to the ground, but the message was still visible, staring up at the sky. "Financial default. It is a lie!" she shrieked, turning to the line of cars. "It is a mistake. The system is down. We paid. We paid for everything. Open the gate." Her voice was shrill, hysterical panic rising in her throat, as she realized the audience she had cultivated was witnessing her lowest moment. A man stepped out of the black Bentley. He was tall, silver-haired, and wearing a suit that probably cost more than my car. This was Mr. Gentry. I recognized him from the photos Lance had left on our kitchen table while bragging about his guest list. Gentry was a shark, a man who moved millions with a phone call. He walked up to Lance, his movements slow and deliberate. He did not look confused. He looked lethal. Lance, Gentry said, his voice cutting through the noise of the honking horns. "What is the meaning of this?" Lance spun around, sweat dripping from his forehead. "Mr. Gentry, I am so sorry. It is a misunderstanding, a banking error. My father-in-law, he is senile. He messed up the transfer. Marcus, the owner, is a friend. I will fix this. Just give me 5 minutes." Gentry looked at the sign on the ground. Then he looked at Lance. He took off his sunglasses, revealing eyes that were cold and dead. "You brought me all the way from Palo Alto for a banking error, Lance. You told me this event was fully funded. You told me you had liquid capital. You told me you were a serious player." Lance smiled, a frantic rictus of terror. I am a player. This is just a glitch. The money is there. It is just frozen," Gentry laughed. It was a dry, harsh sound. "A glitch," he repeated. "Lance. In my world, a glitch is a typo in a contract. This is a default. This is amateur hour. You wasted my time, you wasted my fuel, and you made me look like an idiot for vouching for you to the board. Do you know how much my time is worth?" "Please, Mr. Gentry," Lance begged, reaching out, as if to touch the man's sleeve. Gentry took a step back, his face twisting in disgust. "Don't touch me. You are done, Lance. The seed funding is pulled. The deal is dead. Do not call my office. Do not email me. If I see your face in California, I will have security throw you out." Gentry turned on his heel and walked back to his Bentley. He got in and said something to his driver. The car began to reverse, executing a 3-point turn in the middle of the road, forcing the other cars to scramble out of the way. One by one, the other guests followed suit. They saw the shark leaving, and they smelled the blood in the water. The investors, the VIPs, the important people. They didn't even get out of their cars to ask what happened. They just turned around and drove away, leaving Lance standing in the dust of their exhaust. Lance stood there watching his future drive away. His shoulders slumped. He looked small, insignificant. Brittany was screaming at the security guard now. She had picked up a rock from the landscaping and was threatening to throw it through the guard booth window. "Call the police," she yelled. "I am going to sue you. I am going to sue this entire hotel for breach of contract. Do you know who my father is? He will buy this place and fire all of you." I took another sip of coffee. The irony was thick enough to chew on. She was using my name as a threat, the same name she had been ashamed of 12 hours ago. She was threatening them with the power of the father she had disinvited. I watched as the security guard finally moved. He unclipped a radio from his belt and spoke a few words. A moment later, a Suffolk County police cruiser turned the corner, lights flashing, but no siren. They weren't coming to open the gate. They were coming to remove the trespassers. Lance saw the police and froze. He looked at Brittany, who was still screaming, still throwing gravel at the gate. Then he looked around wildly, scanning the street. His eyes locked onto the coffee shop window. For a second, I thought he saw me. I sat perfectly still, my hand around the warm mug, but his gaze slid past me. He wasn't looking for me. He was looking for an escape. He was looking for a way out of the hole he had dug, but there was no way out. The police car pulled up. 2 officers stepped out. They walked up to Lance and Brittany, not with aggression, but with the tired posture of men who had to deal with a domestic disturbance on a Saturday morning. I saw one officer point to the car, telling them to move it. I saw Brittany point a finger in the officer's face, screaming about her rights, about her wedding day. The officer didn't argue. He just took out his handcuffs. I didn't stay to watch the arrest. I didn't need to. The message had been delivered. The stage was empty, the audience had left, and the actors were being escorted off the set. I stood up, leaving a $20 bill on the table for a $3 coffee. It was the only money I would spend that day. I walked out the back door of the coffee shop to where my old Ford truck was parked in the alley. I got in, started the engine, and drove away in the opposite direction. The radio was playing a classic rock station, and the sun was shining. It was a beautiful day, but the storm was far from over. I knew my daughter, and I knew Lance. They wouldn't take this lying down. They would come for me, and when they did, I needed to be ready because the next battlefield wouldn't be a wedding venue. It would be my own front door. I arrived home 20 minutes before they did. I parked my truck in the garage and closed the door, plunging the space into darkness. I walked into my kitchen, the linoleum floor cool under my boots. The silence of the house was different now. Before it was the silence of a lonely old man waiting for a phone call. Now it was the silence of a fortress waiting for a siege. I didn't lock the front door. I unlocked it. I slid the deadbolt back and took off the chain. I wanted them to come in. I wanted there to be no barriers between us. No excuses, just the raw, ugly truth of what we had become. I poured myself a glass of water and sat in my favorite armchair, the one facing the entrance. It was leather, cracked and worn, shaped by years of my weight. I rested my hands on my knees. My knuckles were swollen with arthritis, but underneath the age, the bone was still dense. I had spent 40 years loading freight, fighting union brawls on the docks of New Jersey, and staring down men who would cut your throat for a pack of cigarettes. Lance thought he was dangerous because he yelled at waiters. He was about to learn the difference between a tantrum and a threat. I heard the engine first. It was the Range Rover again, pushed to its limit, the engine whining in high gear. It skidded into my driveway, spraying gravel against the siding of the house. Car doors slammed. Heavy footsteps pounded on the wooden porch steps. There was no knock. There was no doorbell. The handle turned, and when the door didn't open fast enough, a boot kicked it. The wood around the frame splintered with a dry crack, and the door flew open, banging against the interior wall. Lance stood in the doorway, silhouetted by the afternoon sun. He was panting, his chest heaving. His tuxedo shirt was torn at the shoulder, likely from his earlier encounter with the police. His eyes were wild, bloodshot, darting around the room, until they locked onto me. Brittany was right behind him, her face a mask of smeared makeup and pure, unadulterated hatred. "You are sitting there," Lance screamed, his voice shredding the quiet air. "You are just sitting there drinking water. Do you have any idea what you have done? You destroyed me. You destroyed everything." I took a slow sip of water. I didn't stand up. I didn't speak. My silence was a mirror reflecting his madness back at him, and he couldn't stand it. He stepped into the room, his fists clenched. "Get up," he roared. "Get up and fix this. Call the bank. Transfer the funds. I know you have it stashed away somewhere, you miserly old bastard. Give me the money." I set the glass down on the side table. The coaster made a soft clink. "Get out of my house, Lance," I said. My voice was low, gravelly. It wasn't a shout. It was a fact. That snapped the last thread of his control. Lance let out a guttural sound, a mix of a sob and a growl, and he charged. He covered the distance between the door and my chair in 3 strides. He raised his right hand, balled into a fist, aiming for my face. He was young, 30 years younger than me. He was taller. He worked out at a gym with air conditioning. But he had never been in a fight in his life. He telegraphed the punch from a mile away, pulling his arm back, closing his eyes as he swung. I didn't panic. I didn't even stand up fully. I just shifted my weight. I learned a long time ago that you don't fight force with force. You fight it with leverage. As his fist came down, I brought my left forearm up hard, catching his wrist and deflecting the blow to the side. The momentum carried him forward off balance. I stood up then, using the strength in my legs, and drove my shoulder into his chest. It wasn't a graceful move. It was ugly and effective. The air left his lungs in a sharp wheeze. He stumbled back, his feet tangling in the rug. I didn't let him recover. I grabbed the lapels of his ruined tuxedo jacket and twisted, using his own weight to spin him around and slam him against the wall. Pictures rattled. The drywall groaned. I pinned him there, my forearm pressed against his throat, just hard enough to make breathing a conscious effort. "Don't you ever," I whispered, my face inches from his, "raise a hand to me in my own home. I was breaking fingers on the loading docks while you were still learning to tie your shoes." Lance clawed at my arm, his face turning a blotchy purple. His eyes were wide with shock. He had expected the frail old man in the bad suit. He had forgotten that the old man used to move pianos for a living. But it wasn't the fear of physical pain I saw in his eyes. It was something else. It was terror. Pure, animalistic terror. "You don't understand," he choked out, spit flying onto my cheek. "You have to pay. If I don't pay them, if I don't have the money, they're going to kill me." I froze. I lessened the pressure on his throat just a fraction. "Who?" I asked. "Who is going to kill you, Lance, the florist, the caterer?" "No," he gasped, tears leaking from his eyes. "Not them, the investors, the real ones. I borrowed against the wedding. I promised them a return by Monday. 2 million. If I don't have it, Jackson, please. They aren't businessmen. They're animals. They will cut me into pieces." The pieces fell into place. The desperation, the need for VIPs, the absolute panic when the credit lines were cut. This wasn't just a Ponzi scheme. It was a loan shark debt. He had borrowed dirty money to fund a fake lifestyle to lure in clean money to pay back the dirty money. And I had just cut the rope while he was dangling over the shark tank. "That sounds like a personal problem, Lance," I said, cold as ice. "I suggest you start running." I let him go. He slid down the wall, coughing, clutching his throat. He looked pathetic. A broken man in a broken suit. But I didn't have time to savor the victory because a sudden stinging pain exploded across the side of my face. Smack. My head snapped to the side. My glasses flew off, skittering across the hardwood floor. The sound of the slap echoed in the room, louder than the door, breaking louder than Lance's screams. I stood there for a second, the skin on my cheek burning, my ear ringing. I slowly turned my head back. Brittany was standing there. Her hand was still raised, her palm red. She was breathing hard, her chest heaving beneath the silk robe. Her eyes were blazing with a fury so intense it looked like madness. "You animal!" she screamed. "Get your hands off him! How dare you look at you! You're violent! You're crazy!" I looked at my daughter, the little girl I had carried on my shoulders, the teenager I had taught to drive, the woman I had walked down the aisle or tried to. I touched my cheek. It was hot. She had hit me. My own flesh and blood had struck me to defend a man who had just tried to assault me. "Brittany," I said, my voice hollow. "Shut up," she shrieked. "Just shut up, I hate you. Do you hear me? I wish you had died instead of Mom. At least she had class. At least she wouldn't have ruined my life because she was jealous." "Jealous?" I asked, genuinely confused. "You think I did this because I'm jealous?" "Yes, jealous." She stepped closer, poking a manicured finger into my chest. "You're jealous that Lance is successful. You're jealous that he has vision. You're just a sad, lonely old man with your dusty money and your empty life. You couldn't stand seeing us happy. You couldn't stand seeing us shine. So you broke it. You're a saboteur, Dad. A petty, jealous saboteur." I looked at Lance, still cowering on the floor, weeping about men who would cut him up. Successful. Visionary. I looked at Brittany, blind with rage, rewriting reality to fit her narrative. She wasn't just defending him. She believed him. She believed the lie so completely that she was willing to strike her father to protect it. "He just told me he owes money to sharks, Brittany," I said quietly. "Did you hear that? He's not successful. He's broke. And he's dangerous." "Liar!" she screamed, covering her ears like a child. "He's under stress. You pushed him to this. You provoked him. This is all your fault." She went to Lance, kneeling beside him, cradling his head, cooing to him as if he were the victim. "It's okay, baby. Shh, we'll fix it. We'll get the money. We don't need him. We'll take what's ours." She looked up at me then, and her eyes were cold. Not hot with rage anymore, but cold with calculation. It was the same look Lance had given me the night before. The infection had spread. "Get out," I said. "Both of you, before I call the police and finish what Marcus started." Brittany helped Lance stand up. He was shaky, leaning on her. They moved toward the door, stepping over the splintered wood of the frame. At the threshold, Brittany turned back. She didn't look like my daughter anymore. She looked like a stranger. "This isn't over, Dad," she hissed. "You think you can just cut us off? You think you can assault my husband and get away with it? You're old. You're confused. You're violent. People saw what you did today. The police saw you running away. The neighbors heard you shouting." Lance straightened up, wiping the snot and tears from his face. A new, sinister confidence crept into his voice, masking the fear from moments ago. "She's right, Jackson. You're clearly not well. Attacking family members, canceling events due to paranoia, hiding money. Those are symptoms, classic symptoms." He stepped out onto the porch, pulling Brittany with him. "We're going to get you help, Jackson." He called out, his voice dripping with false concern and veiled threat. "Whether you want it or not, we have a duty, a legal duty. Enjoy your house while you can. You won't be in it much longer." They walked down the steps to the Range Rover. I watched them go. I didn't move until the taillights disappeared around the curve of the street. Then I closed the broken door. I tried to lock it, but the frame was shattered. The lock wouldn't engage. My fortress was breached. I walked to the kitchen and picked up my glasses from the floor. One of the lenses was cracked. A spider web of fractures right in the center of my vision. I put them on anyway. The world looked fragmented, broken. I touched my cheek again. It throbbed. The physical pain was nothing. I had broken bones before. I had been stitched up in back alleys. But the pain in my chest, the spot where my daughter had pointed her finger and wished me dead, that was a different kind of wound. It was a cold, spreading numbness. Lance's words echoed in the empty house. Get you help. Legal duty. I knew what that meant. I knew exactly what they were planning. They couldn't get the money by asking. They couldn't get it by force. So they were going to take it by law. They were going to weaponize the system. They were going to paint me as a senile, violent old lunatic who needed a guardian. I went to the sink and splashed cold water on my face. I washed away the sweat of the fight. I looked at myself in the mirror. I looked old. I looked tired. I looked like exactly what they said I was. But then I looked closer. I looked at the eyes behind the cracked lens. They weren't confused. They were sharp. They were angry. Okay, I said to the empty room. You want to play the legal game, let's play. I wasn't going to wait for them to file the paperwork. I wasn't going to wait for the men in white coats. I walked to my bedroom and reached under the mattress. I pulled out a burner phone I kept for emergencies, a habit from the old days when cargo sometimes went missing. I dialed a number I hadn't used in 5 years. Goldstein, I said when the line picked up. It's Jackson. I need you. And bring the shark suit. I'm about to be hunted. The blue lights arrived before the siren did. They swept through the front window, painting the living room in a rhythmic strobe of azure and white. It was a silent disco of emergency, signaling the end of the brawl and the beginning of the performance. I hung up the phone before Goldstein could answer. I did not want him to hear what was about to happen. I did not want him to hear me being treated like a criminal. In my own home, Lance saw the lights, and the transformation was instantaneous. It was like watching a snake shed its skin. In the span of 3 seconds, the feral, terrified animal that had been cowering against my wall vanished. In its place stood a concerned, grieving victim. He smoothed his torn tuxedo jacket. He wiped the blood from his lip, not to hide it, but to display it. He slumped his shoulders, adopting a posture of non-threatening exhaustion. He looked at Brittany and gave a tiny, almost imperceptible nod. Brittany understood. She stopped screaming. She took a deep breath and let her face crumble into a mask of pure tragedy. She moved to Lance's side, supporting him, her hand on his arm, her head resting on his shoulder. They looked like the survivors of a natural disaster, not the perpetrators of a home invasion. The heavy boots of the police officers crunched on the broken glass of the porch frame. Flashlights cut through the gloom of the hallway. Police department. Make yourself known, a voice boomed. We are in here, Lance called out, his voice trembling just the right amount. Please help us. He is confused. He is hurt. 2 officers stepped into the living room. One was a young rookie, hand resting nervously on his holster. The other was older, a sergeant with gray at his temples and eyes that had seen too many domestic disputes. The sergeant scanned the room, taking in the shattered doorframe, the overturned side table, the broken glass, and finally, the 3 of us. He saw Lance, tall, young, dressed in formal wear, albeit ruined. He saw Brittany weeping softly in a silk robe. And then he saw me, an old man in a stained undershirt, jeans, and work boots, standing in the shadows with cracked glasses and a bruise forming on his cheek. To him, I did not look like the homeowner. I looked like the problem. What happened here? The sergeant asked, his gaze lingering on my clenched fists. Officer, thank God you came, Lance said, stepping forward, slightly limp. It is my father-in-law, Jackson. We came to check on him. He missed the wedding this morning. He was supposed to be there. He didn't show up. We were worried. He has been having episodes lately, forgetting things, getting agitated. We thought maybe he had fallen. I stood there listening to the lie weave itself into the air. It was elegant in its simplicity. He was using my absence at the wedding, the absence he had orchestrated, as proof of my mental decline. We knocked, but he didn't answer. Lance continued, tears actually welling in his eyes. We heard crashing sounds inside. I got scared. I thought he was having a stroke or a heart attack. Forced the door. It was the only way, but when we got in, he didn't recognize us. He thought we were intruders. He attacked me, officer. I tried to restrain him, but he is strong when he is like this. The sergeant looked at me. Jackson, sir. Is this true? I stepped into the light. I looked at the officer. I looked at the broken door. This man kicked my door in, I said. My voice raspy. I did not invite him. He attacked me. I defended myself. He is lying. The sergeant looked at the door frame. The wood was indeed splintered inward, consistent with a kick. But Lance was ready for that. I had to kick it in, officer, Lance said quickly. He had the deadbolt on. We were terrified he was dying in here. Look at him. Does he look like he is in his right mind? Brittany chose that moment to speak. Her voice was a whisper, a masterpiece of sorrow. Daddy, it is me, Brittany. It is your daughter. Do you know who I am? I looked at her. My heart felt like a stone sinking into a deep black well. She was looking at me with wide tear-filled eyes, begging the officers to believe her performance. She was using the years of love I had given her as a weapon against me. She knew exactly how to hurt me, not with fists, but with pity. I know who you are, Brittany, I said softly. You are the woman who slapped me 5 minutes ago because I wouldn't pay your husband Seth's gambling debts, Brittany gasped, covering her mouth. Oh God, he is worse than I thought. Gambling debts, Dad. Lance is a tech entrepreneur. We don't have debts. He is making up stories again. He gets paranoid. He thinks everyone is stealing from him, the sergeant sighed. He looked at me and I could see the judgment settling in his eyes. He saw a disheveled old man ranting about gambling debts and conspiracies. He saw a young, successful-looking couple trying to help. He made the calculation, and I came up short. Sir, the sergeant said, stepping closer to me, his hand raised in a calming gesture. Do you have any weapons on you? I am not armed, I said. I am just tired. Get them out of my house. We can just leave him, Lance pleaded, looking at the officer. He is a danger to himself. Look at this place. It is a mess. He is violent. We need to get him evaluated. He needs a welfare hold. A welfare hold. The 5150 code. Involuntary psychiatric hold. They wanted the police to drag me out in handcuffs, not for a crime, but for my own good. It was the nuclear option. If they took me in tonight, I would be sedated, processed, and labeled. Once that label is on you, it never comes off. It would be the first brick in the wall of the conservatorship they were planning. I straightened my back, I took off my cracked glasses, and looked the sergeant in the eye. I knew that if I shouted, if I got angry, I would lose. I had to be the calmest person in the room. Officer, I said, my voice steady. I'm 72 years old. I am a retired logistics manager. I own this home free and clear. These two individuals are trespassing. I asked them to leave. They refused. They assaulted me. I defended myself. I am not confused. I am not senile. And I am asking you to remove them from my property immediately. The sergeant paused. He looked at me, really. Looked at me for the first time. He saw the bruise on my cheek. He saw the clarity in my eyes. He looked back at Lance, who was perhaps pushing the act a little too hard, clutching his ribs a little too dramatically. This is a civil matter, the sergeant said finally. We are not taking anyone in tonight unless you want to press charges for the assault. But looking at the damage here and the conflicting stories, it is going to be a wash. You both have marks on you. I don't want to press charges, Lance said quickly, benevolent and forgiving. I just want my father-in-law to be safe. We will go. We will let him calm down. The sergeant nodded. Okay, folks, let's clear out, sir. Stay in your house. Get that door fixed. Lance nodded, bowing his head in submission. Thank you, officer. We will go. Come on, honey. Let's leave him be. They turned to leave. The officers escorted them out onto the porch. followed to the threshold, watching them go. The rookie officer went to his car to radio in the report. The sergeant walked Brittany down the steps. Lance stopped. He turned back to me. He waited until the sergeant was out of earshot. He stepped close, one foot on the porch, leaning in until I could smell the sweat and the fear on him. His face was no longer the mask of the concerned son-in-law. It was the face of a man who had stared into the abyss and decided to jump in. "You got lucky, old man," he whispered. His voice was a hiss, low and venomous. "You think you won, you think this is over. You have no idea what is coming." I stared at him, saying nothing. "You embarrassed me," Lance said. "I lost everything today because of you. But I am going to get it back, and I am going to take it from your cold, dead fingers. But first, I am going to make you pay, so I am going to prove you are crazy, Jackson. I am going to find a doctor who will sign the paper. I am going to put you in a hole so deep and so dark, you will forget your own name. You will regret not dying today, I promise you. I will put you in a madhouse." He pulled back a smile, touching his lips. A smile that didn't reach his dead eyes. He turned and walked down the steps, taking Brittany's hand, leading her to the Range Rover. They drove away, trailing dust, leaving me standing in the broken frame of my life. The police cruiser lingered for a moment, then pulled away, leaving me alone in the gathering dusk. I touched the side of the doorframe, where Lance's boot had splintered the wood. I looked at the empty street. He thought he had terrified me. He thought the threat of the asylum would make me cower. But he was wrong. Fear is for people who have something to lose. I had already lost my daughter. I had lost my peace. All I had left was the war. I went back inside and pushed the heavy oak dresser in front of the broken door. It was a temporary barricade. I picked up the burner phone from the table. I dialed Goldstein again. He picked up on the first ring. "Jackson, Arpipo. You safe? I am alive," I said, pouring the rest of the cold coffee down the sink. "But the timeline has moved up. They aren't just coming for the money anymore, Goldstein. They are coming for my mind. Lance just threatened to commit me." I heard the rustle of papers on the other end. Goldstein was already working. "Good, let them try," Goldstein said, his voice rasping with the excitement of the hunt. "If they file for guardianship, they have to go through the courts. They have to prove it. And that means discovery. Jackson, that means we get to look at their finances. We get to look at their communications. They just opened the door and invited us in." I sat down in the dark living room, the phone pressed to my ear. "What do I need to do?" "You need to disappear for a few days," Goldstein said. "Get out of the house. Go to the safe house if they come back with a social worker or a dirty doctor. I don't want you there. Let them find an empty house. Let them look desperate." "No," I said. "I am not running. This is my house, Jackson. Listen to me." "No." "You listen," I said. "I am staying, but I am not staying alone. Send the team, send Butch, send the boys. I want witnesses next time, and Goldstein. Yes. Find out who Lance owes money to. Find out which sharks are circling. I want to know who I am competing with for his carcass." I hung up. The sun had set. The house was dark. I didn't turn on the lights. I sat in the dark, waiting. The legal threat was real. The asylum was a terrifying possibility. But Lance had made a mistake. He thought I was a senile old man defending a nest egg. He didn't realize he was poking a dragon that had been sleeping for 15 years. He wanted to play the insanity card. Fine. I would show him insanity. I would show him the kind of madness that comes from a father who has nothing left to lose but his vengeance. I checked the charge on my phone. I checked the locks on the back door. Then I sat down to wait for the next wave, knowing that the waters were rising, and I was the only one who knew how to swim. 3 days of silence is a long time when you are waiting for a war to start. I spent those 72 hours turning my house into a bunker. Butch and his men patrolled the perimeter in shifts, silent shadows with earpieces and concealed carry permits. I slept in my chair facing the door with a shotgun across my lap, not because I intended to use it, but because the weight of the steel reminded me that I was still in control. Or so I thought. I expected thugs, I expected loan sharks with baseball bats to come looking for Lance's money. I expected Lance himself, drunk and desperate, trying to burn the house down. I was ready for violence. I was ready for a fight. What I was not ready for was the quiet, terrifying efficiency of the bureaucracy. It happened on Tuesday morning at 9 a.m. The sun was shining, the birds were singing, and the world looked normal. Butch tapped on the window. "Jackson, we have company, but it isn't the bad guys." "It looks like the county." I looked out the window. A caravan had pulled up, not black SUVs, not beat-up sedans, but official government vehicles, a police cruiser, a sedan with the seal of the Department of Social Services, and an ambulance idling quietly, its lights off, but its engine running. I felt a cold pit open in my stomach. This wasn't a raid, this was an intervention. I put the shotgun away, stashing it under the floorboards. I didn't want to give them an excuse. I unlocked the barricaded door and stepped onto the porch just as a woman in a beige pantsuit walked up the steps, flanked by two uniformed officers. She held a clipboard like a shield and wore an expression of practiced pity that terrified me more than any gun. "Sir Jackson Vance?" she asked. Her voice was calm, professional, the voice of a woman who destroyed lives for a living. "I am Jackson," I said, crossing my arms. "What is this?" "My name is Sarah Jenkins. I am a caseworker with Adult Protective Services. We have received a court order for your emergency detention and evaluation. Detention." I laughed. Dry, harsh sound. I haven't committed a crime. "No, Mr. Vance, you haven't. This isn't criminal. This is medical. We have an ex parte order signed by Judge Holloway, granting emergency temporary guardianship to the state pending a competency hearing. We have credible evidence that you are suffering from advanced dementia and pose an immediate danger to yourself and others. Dementia." The word hung in the air, absurd and heavy. I looked at her, stunned. I looked at the officers, their hands resting near their tasers. "Dementia," I repeated. "I run a logistics network. I manage millions of dollars. I am not senile." Ms. Jenkins pulled a document from her clipboard. It wasn't just a court order, it was a medical file, thick and official looking. She turned it around so I could see. "We have a sworn affidavit from your primary care physician, Dr. Anthony Moretti, detailing a 6-month history of cognitive decline, paranoid delusions, and violent outbursts." I stared at the name. Dr. Anthony Moretti. I had never heard that name in my life. "I haven't seen a doctor in 2 years," I said, my voice rising. "And I don't know who Moretti is. This is a lie. This is a fabrication." "See," Ms. Jenkins said, nodding to the officers. "Paranoia, denial of medical history, disorientation. It is consistent with the report." I looked past her down the driveway, and there I saw the architect of my destruction. Lance was sitting in the back of the police cruiser. The window rolled down just enough for me to see his face. He wasn't smiling. He looked devastated. He looked like a grieving son watching his father fade away. He wiped a fake tear from his eye, knowing I was watching, knowing I couldn't touch him. "You did this," I shouted, pointing at the car. "You forged this, Lance. You forged the doctor's signature." "Mr. Vance, please calm down," one of the officers said, stepping forward. He was big, a wall of blue uniform. "You are confirming the report right now, sir. We don't want to use restraints, but we have a court order. You are coming with us to St. Jude's for a 72-hour psychiatric hold." I realized the trap then. It was perfect. It was inescapable. If I fought them, I was violent. If I shouted, I was unstable. If I claimed a conspiracy involving my son-in-law and a fake doctor, I was paranoid. Every defense I raised only tightened the noose. Butch stepped onto the porch, his hand drifting toward his belt. "Officer, this man is sane. He is being targeted. Step back." Security, the officer barked, his hand dropping to his gun. This is a court order. Interfering is a felony obstruction. Do you want to lose your license today? I looked at Butch, saw the calculation in his eyes. He could drop these two cops before they cleared leather, but then we would be fugitives. Then I would be a cop killer. The game would be over. I shook my head slightly. Butch froze, his jaw clenched. It is okay. Butch, I said, my voice steady, though my hands were shaking with rage. Stand down. Call Goldstein. Tell him they are taking me to St. Jude's. Tell him to bring the judge. I turned back to Mrs. Jenkins. I am going to come with you, I said, because I am a law-abiding citizen, but you are making a mistake, a very expensive mistake. We are just here to help Mr. Vance, she said, her voice dripping with that unbearable condescension. Please step this way. I walked down the steps. The officers flanked me, grabbing my arms, not roughly but firmly, treating me like a piece of fragile, volatile cargo. I walked past the police cruiser. I locked eyes with Lance. He looked at me, and for a second, the mask slipped. He winked, just a tiny flutter of an eyelid, a signal, a victory lap. I stopped digging my heels into the gravel. I wanted to lung at him. I wanted to break the glass and wrap my hands around his throat, but the officers tightened their grip, pulling me toward the ambulance. Get in the stretcher, sir, the paramedic said, gesturing to the open doors. I am not getting on a stretcher, I said. I can walk, please, sir. Don't make this difficult. I climbed into the back of the ambulance. The interior smelled of antiseptic and despair. The doors slammed shut, sealing me in darkness, cut only by the thin strip of light from the window. I sat on the bench, refusing to lie down. The ambulance lurched forward, and I felt the vibration of the tires on the asphalt, carrying me away from my home, away from my freedom. I closed my eyes and tried to control my breathing. Panic was clawing at my throat. I was in the system now, and the system was a machine designed to grind old men into dust. Lance had found the one weapon I couldn't fight, with money or fists. He had weaponized my age. He had turned my autonomy into a symptom. I thought about the medical file. The detail in it must have been exquisite to get a judge to sign an ex parte order in 24 hours. Lance hadn't just forged a signature. He had created a narrative. He must have spent the last 3 days while I was barricaded in my house building a paper trail of a madman. And I had helped him, my isolation, my anger, my violence against him in the living room. It all fed the lie. The ambulance slowed down, then stopped. I heard the doors open. I expected a hospital entrance, a busy ER. But it was quiet. 2 orderlies in white scrubs were waiting. They weren't the kind who helped you with a bedpan. They were the kind who handled the violent ward. They were big, thick-necked and dead-eyed. Welcome to St. Jude's. Mr. Vance, one of them said. He didn't sound welcoming. He sounded like a prison guard. I stepped out. My hands were trembling, not from age, but from adrenaline. I looked around. We were at a side entrance, the service bay. The walls were high concrete, topped with wire. This wasn't a hospital, it was a holding pen. I reached for my pocket for my phone just to check the time, just to feel a connection to the outside world. Phone, the orderly said, holding out a hand. No personal effects on the ward, I hesitated. Give it here or we take it. I handed him my phone. I handed him my wallet, my belt, my shoelaces. Piece by piece, they stripped me of my identity, turning me from Jackson Vance, the logistics tycoon, into patient 409. A dementia case, a problem to be managed. They led me down a long white corridor. The fluorescent lights hummed a low, maddening buzz. The air was cold. I heard screaming in the distance, a woman's voice, high and thin, shouting about spiders. It was the sound of madness, and now I was part of it. They opened a heavy steel door. Room 4, the orderly said. Dr. Moretti will see you shortly. The door clanged shut behind me. The lock clicked, a heavy final sound. I was alone in a room with padded walls and a single bolted-down bed. I walked to the small, reinforced window. I looked out, all I could see was a brick wall and a patch of gray sky. I was trapped, I was neutralized. Lance had won the first round. He had taken me off the board. But as I stood there, tracing the cracks in the glass, I felt a cold resolve harden in my chest. He had made a mistake. He had put me in a cage, but he hadn't checked the lock. He thought this was the end. He thought I would fade away in this room, drugged and forgotten. But he didn't know about the burner phone taped to the inside of my calf beneath my pant leg. The orderlies had been lazy. They had checked my pockets, but they hadn't patted me down. They underestimated the old man, just like everyone else. I sat on the bed and waited for Dr. Moretti. I wanted to meet the man who had sold his soul to my son-in-law. And when I did, I wasn't going to plead insanity, I was going to plead war. The room was not white, it was a shade of gray that smelled of bleach and old urine, a color designed to drain the hope out of a man. The walls were padded, but the floor was cold concrete. I sat on the edge of the mattress, my hands gripping the thin wool blanket, trying to stop them from shaking. It had been 3 hours since they took my clothes, 3 hours since they locked the heavy steel door. 3 hours of silence broken only by the hum of the ventilation system and the occasional scream from down the hall. I was Jackson Vance. I was a man who moved millions of dollars of freight across the ocean. I was a man who commanded respect, but in this room I was just a number on a chart. I was a problem to be solved. I paced the small cell, measuring it 4 steps across, 6 steps long. It was a cage, and I was the old lion waiting for the zookeeper. The lock clicked. The sound was loud like a gunshot in the small space. The door swung open, and a man stepped in. He was flanked by the 2 orderlies who had processed me, the ones with the dead eyes. The man in the middle was different. He wore a white coat that was spotless, pressed to perfection. Underneath, he wore a silk tie and a suit that cost more than the average worker made in a month. He was handsome, in an oily way, with slicked back hair and a smile that showed too many teeth. "Mr. Vance," he said. His voice was smooth like oil on water. "I am Dr. Anthony Moretti. I am the medical director here at St. Jude's. I understand you have had a very stressful morning." I stopped pacing, stood in the center of the room, feet shoulder-width apart, a stance I had learned on the docks 40 years ago. "You are the man who signed the affidavit," I said. "You are the man who says I have dementia. I have never met you before in my life." Dr. Moretti sighed, a theatrical sound of patience, tested. He opened the file in his hands, flipping through pages that I knew were filled with lies. Memory loss is a classic symptom. "Jackson, may I call you Jackson? You might not remember our sessions, but I assure you they happened. Your son-in-law. Lance has been very diligent in documenting your decline. It is tragic, really, seeing a strong mind collapse. He wasn't just lying, he was enjoying it. I saw the glint in his eyes. He liked the power. He liked rewriting reality." I took a step forward and the 2 orderlies tensed their muscles, coiling, ready to strike. "Drop the act." "Moretti," I said. My voice was low, dangerous. "How much did he pay you? How much is my life worth to you?" 50,000, 100, Moretti laughed. It wasn't a happy sound, it was a dry bark. Paranoia, another symptom. "You believe everyone is conspiring against you. You believe your family is stealing from you. It fits the diagnosis perfectly. Jackson, you are sick, and because you are sick, you are a danger to yourself. That is why we are here. We need to stabilize you." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small paper cup. Inside were 3 pills, 2 blue, 1 red. They looked like candy. They looked like death. "What is that?" I asked. "A sedative," Moretti said. "And an antipsychotic. It will help you sleep. It will help clear the fog. We have a competency hearing in 48 hours. Jackson, we need you to be calm. We need you to be lucid." Lucid, I knew what those pills were. They were a chemical lobotomy, thorazine maybe, or something stronger. If I took them, I wouldn't be lucid. I would be a zombie. I would walk into that courtroom drooling, unable to speak my own name, unable to defend myself against the lies, and the judge seeing a shuffling, mumbling. Old man would sign the paper without a second thought, giving Lance everything. "I am not taking those," I said. Moretti's smile didn't waver, but his eyes went cold. "We can do this the easy way, Jackson, or the hard way. The easy way is you swallow them with a cup of water. The hard way involves restraints, a needle, and a lot of indignity. At your age, your bones are brittle. We wouldn't want an accident, would we?" The threat hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. An accident, just like the cliff, just like the fall, he was telling me. That if I fought, they would break me physically. Before they broke me mentally, I looked at the orderlies. They were waiting for a signal. They wanted me to fight. They wanted an excuse. I had to think fast. I was trapped. I was outnumbered. I couldn't fight my way out of this, but I was a logistics man. I knew that. When you can't stop a shipment, you reroute it. I had to make him believe he had won. I let my shoulders slump. I let my face crumble into an expression of defeat and fear. I made my hands tremble visibly. "I am tired," I whispered. "I am so tired. It is okay." "Jackson," Moretti said, his voice softening into a fake, soothing purr. "We are here to help. Just take the medicine." He handed me the cup and a plastic bottle of water. I took them. My hands shook, spilling a little water on the floor. I looked at the pills. I looked at Moretti. "Will they make the voices stop?" I asked, adding a touch of madness to the performance, giving him exactly what he wanted to see. "Yes," Moretti said, smiling, the smile of a predator, watching a trap snap shut. "They will make everything stop." I put the cup to my lips. I tipped the pills into my mouth. They tasted bitter, chalky. I took a large gulp of water, swishing it around. I felt the pills hit my tongue. I didn't swallow. I maneuvered them with my tongue, sliding them into the pocket between my gum and my cheek, a trick I had learned from a smuggler in '82. I swallowed the water, making a loud gulping sound. I opened my mouth slightly, showing him my tongue. Moretti leaned in, inspecting me like a prize horse. "Good. Very good. Jackson, see, that wasn't so hard." He patted my shoulder, a gesture that made my skin crawl. "You rest now. The nurse will check on you in an hour. Let the medicine do its work." He turned and walked out. The orderlies followed him, casting one last look at me before the heavy steel door slammed shut. The lock clicked, sealing me in again. The moment they were gone, I ran to the small stainless steel toilet in the corner. I spat the pills out. They were starting to dissolve, leaving a trail of blue and red slime in my mouth. I flushed the toilet, watching the chemical chains disappear. I went to the sink and rinsed my mouth out, scrubbing my tongue with my finger, trying to get every trace of the poison out. But I knew I had absorbed some of it. I could already feel a heaviness in my limbs, a slight buzzing in my ears. Time was running out. If I didn't act now, I would pass out. I sat on the bed and pulled up my pant leg, peeled back the duct tape that held the burner phone to my cuff. It hurt tearing the hair, but the pain was good. It kept me sharp. I pressed the power button. The screen lit up a beacon in the gray room, 1 bar of signal. Just one, but it was enough. I didn't call. Speaking would be too loud. The ventilation system might carry the sound. I opened the text message app. My fingers were thick and clumsy, and the small amount of sedative I had swallowed was making them numb. I had to focus. I had to type the coordinates of my own rescue. I typed the number for Goldstein, my lawyer, my friend. The only man who could stop this. Text St. Jude Psych Ward Room 4, Moretti drugging me. Hearing in 48 AHRs, bring fed order SOS Jackson. I hit send. I watched the little spinning circle. The signal was weak. The concrete walls were blocking it. "Come on," I whispered. "Come on," sent. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. I quickly turned the phone off. I couldn't risk it ringing. I taped it back to my leg, smoothing the pant leg down. I lay back on the mattress, closing my eyes. I had to play the part. If the nurse came in and I was awake, she would know. I had to pretend to be sedated. I slowed my breathing. I let my body go limp, but my mind was racing. Moretti was arrogant. He thought he had broken me. He thought I was just another confused old man, but he didn't know about the phone, he didn't know about Goldstein, and he didn't know that I had just given him the rope to hang himself. The heaviness in my legs was getting worse. The edges of my vision were blurring. The drug was powerful, even the small amount I had absorbed. I fought the darkness. I focused on one thing. The look on Lance's face when he realized I wasn't dead, I focused on the anger. It was a hot coal in my chest, burning through the fog. I heard footsteps outside the door. A small sliding panel opened, the nurse checking on the patient, checking on the prisoner. I lay perfectly still, mouth slightly open, drooling a little on the pillow, selling the lie. She closed the panel, the footsteps moved away. I was safe for now. But 48 hours was a long time. If Goldstein didn't come soon, if Moretti decided to increase the dose, if they decided to use the needle next time, I wouldn't be able to fake it. I was walking a tightrope over a pit of vipers, and the only safety net I had was a text message sent into the void. I closed my eyes and let the darkness take me, praying that when I woke up, I would see the face of my lawyer, and not the white coat of my executioner. I was Jackson Vance, I was still in the fight. And as I drifted off, I made a promise to myself. When I get out of here, Moretti is going to lose his license. Lance is going to lose his freedom, and I'm going to buy this hospital just so I can burn it to the ground. I woke up to the sound of a cane hitting metal. It was a sharp, rhythmic clang like a hammer on an anvil. It cut through the fog in my brain, dragging me out of the drug-induced haze. I opened my eyes. The room was spinning, slightly. The gray walls seemed to pulse, but the sound was real. It was coming from the hallway, followed by a voice that sounded like gravel in a cement mixer. I demand to see my client immediately, or I will have this entire facility surrounded by federal marshals in 10 minutes. Do you hear me? I said, open this door. I smiled. It was a weak, lopsided smile, but it was there, Goldstein. He had come. There was a scuffle of footsteps, the beep of a keycard, and then the heavy steel door flew open, slamming against the bumper on the wall. Standing in the doorway was a man who looked like he had been carved out of old oak and dressed in an Armani suit. Saul Goldstein was 75 years old, 5'6", and the most terrifying lawyer in the tri-state area. He leaned on a silver-tipped cane, breathing hard, his face flushed with righteous fury. Behind him, Dr. Moretti looked like a ghost. His slick hair was messed up. His white coat seemed too big for him. He was holding a piece of paper, his hands shaking so hard it rattled. Mr. Goldstein, please, Moretti stammered. We were just following protocol. The patient was agitated. We had a court order. You had a napkin signed by a local judge who owes you favors. Goldstein barked, snatching the paper from Moretti's hand. This is a writ of habeas corpus signed by federal judge Hawthorne an hour ago. It orders the immediate release of Jackson Vance due to lack of due process, insufficient medical evidence, and probable cause of conspiracy. You are not holding a patient, doctor. You are holding a hostage, and if he is not walking out of that door in 5 minutes, I am going to sue you until your grandchildren are paying off the debt. Moretti looked at me lying on the bed, still in my street clothes, looking groggy but very much alive. He looked back at Goldstein. He did the math. He realized that whatever Lance had paid him, it wasn't enough to cover federal kidnapping charges. I am releasing him, Moretti whispered. He turned to the orderlies. Get him up, give him his things. I sat up. My head swam, but I forced myself to stand. I wouldn't let them help me. I walked to the door using the wall for support. I stopped in front of Moretti. I was an inch taller than him, and even with the drugs in my system, I felt like a giant compared to him. You made a mistake, doctor, I said, my voice raspy. It wasn't the drugs, it was betting against me. Moretti didn't answer. He just looked at the floor. I walked past him following Goldstein down the long, white corridor. The other patients watched from their doorways, silent witnesses to the escape. I felt the heavy weight of the asylum lifting with every step. The air grew fresher. The hum of the lights faded, and then we were at the exit, pushing through the double doors into the cool night air. Freedom tasted like car exhaust and rain, but it was the sweetest thing I had ever tasted. Goldstein led me to his black town car parked right in the ambulance bay. The driver opened the door, and I slid into the leather seat, sinking back into the luxury I had earned. "You look like hell, Jackson," Goldstein said, climbing in beside me, slamming the door shut. "I feel like hell," I admitted, rubbing my temples. "Did you get the text?" "I got it," Goldstein said, tapping his breast pocket. "Saved my life, I assume, and yours." We went straight to Hawthorne. He didn't like the look of that affidavit. Moretti's history is spotty. Jackson. We found 3 other cases where he signed commitment papers for wealthy seniors under suspicious circumstances. You aren't the first, but you are going to be the last. We drove through the city, the lights blurring past the window. I watched the world go by, feeling a strange disconnect. I had been gone for less than a day, but it felt like years. The world had changed. I had changed. I was no longer a father or a retiree. I was a combatant. "Where is Lance?" I asked. "In the wind," Goldstein said. We tried to serve him with a restraining order at his apartment. The doorman said he hasn't been seen since yesterday morning. Brittany is gone too. They are hiding Jackson, but they can't hide forever. We froze the assets we could find, but they drained the joint account before the lock kicked in. They have about $50,000 in cash that will last them a week, maybe 2, the way they spend. Then they will get desperate. "Desperate men do dangerous things," I said, thinking of the pills, thinking of the cliff. We pulled up to my house an hour later. The street was quiet. The house looked dark and abandoned. The front door was still boarded up with the plywood. Butch had installed after the break-in. It looked like a scar on the face of the home I had built. Butch was waiting in his car in the driveway. He flashed his lights as we approached. He got out carrying a flashlight, looking grim. "Everything quiet, Butch?" I asked, stepping out of the car. "Too quiet," Butch said. "I did a perimeter check an hour ago, no sign of entry." "But Jackson, something feels off." The back gate was unlatched. I felt a prickle of unease on the back of my neck. I walked up the porch steps. Butch unlocked the temporary padlock on the plywood door. We stepped inside. Goldstein followed his cane, tapping on the hardwood. The house smelled wrong. It didn't smell like coffee or old books. It smelled of ozone and dust. The air was disturbed. I flipped the light switch. Nothing. The power was cut. "Flashlights," Butch said, clicking his on. The beam cut through the darkness, sweeping across the living room. It looked normal. The furniture was where I left it. The rug was straight. "Check the office," I said, my heart starting to hammer against my ribs. We walked down the hall to the small room at the back of the house where I kept my records, where I kept the history of my life. The door was closed. I pushed it open. The room had been tossed. Papers were everywhere, strewn across the floor like snow. The desk drawers were pulled out and overturned. Books were pulled from the shelves. But I didn't care about the mess. My eyes went straight to the closet. The floorboards in the closet were ripped up, splintered wood, jutting up like jagged teeth. The small floor safe I had installed 20 years ago, a safe that was supposed to be fireproof and burglar-proof, was gone. There was just a dark square hole in the concrete foundation. They didn't pick the lock. They didn't crack the code. They had taken the whole damn thing. My knees gave out. I stumbled, grabbing the doorframe for support. Goldstein caught my arm. "Jackson." What was in there? I looked at the empty hole, staring into the abyss of my own failure. I had underestimated them again. I thought they were just after the cash. I thought they were just after the liquid assets. But they had gone deeper, they had gone for the jugular, the deeds, I whispered. My voice sounded dead in the silent room. The deeds to the warehouses, Goldstein. The 3 commercial distribution centers in New Jersey. The Amazon contracts. The land titles. Everything I own that generates revenue. It was all in there. Bearer bonds, original titles, no digital backups for the old properties. Goldstein went still. He knew what that meant. Those warehouses were worth $15 million. They were the engine of my wealth. If Lance had the physical deeds and a good enough forger, he could sell them, he could mortgage them, he could leverage them to pay off his sharks and disappear to a country with no extradition treaty. He didn't just want to commit me, I said, the realization cold and sharp as a knife. He wanted me out of the way so he could have time. Time to cut the safe out of the floor, time to steal my empire while I was drooling in a padded room. I walked into the room, stepping over the scattered papers of my life. I looked down into the hole. It was deep, it was dark, and it was empty. They took it all, I said, my retirement, my legacy, my power. Butch shone his light around the edges of the hole. Look, Jackson. They used a concrete saw. There is dust everywhere. This wasn't a smash and grab. This took hours. They were here while you were in the hospital. I turned around and walked out of the office. I walked into the kitchen and opened the drawer where I kept the emergency candles. I lit one. The small flame flickered, casting long, dancing shadows on the walls. I wasn't tired anymore. The drugs were gone, burned away by the adrenaline of total loss. I looked at Goldstein. He looked pale, old. Can they sell them? I asked. It will be hard, Goldstein said, rubbing his chin. They need your signature, or a power of attorney. Or a forgery, I said. Or a man who looks like me. Goldstein nodded slowly. Yes. If they have a good front man, if they have a dirty notary, and we know they have both, I blew out the match. The smoke curled up into the darkness. Then we don't have time for courts, I said. We don't have time for restraining orders. They have my life in a metal box, and they are going to sell it to the highest bidder. We have to find them, Goldstein. And we have to find them tonight, because if they sell those warehouses, I am not just broke, I am erased. I looked at Butch load up. The truck, I said. We are going hunting, and call the boys, the ones who don't mind getting their hands dirty. We aren't calling the police for this one. We are calling the union. Because Lance had made a fatal error. He stole from a man who used to run the docks. He stole the cargo, and you never, ever steal the cargo. We did not go to the police station to file a report regarding the stolen safe. We went to a basement office in Queens that smelled of stale cigar smoke and burnt coffee. This was the domain of Graves, a private investigator Goldstein had kept on retainer for 30 years. Graves did not look like a detective. He looked like a retired boxer with a nose that had been broken too many times and fingers as thick as sausages. But he was the best data miner on the East Coast. If information existed, Graves could find it, and if it did not exist, he could find out who erased it. I sat on a folding metal chair watching Graves type on a computer that looked like it belonged in a museum. The screen glowed green, reflecting in his glasses. Goldstein paced the small room, his cane clicking rhythmically on the concrete floor. Butch stood by the door, arms crossed, a silent sentinel. We have been looking at this wrong, Jackson, Graves grunted without turning around. You have been treating Lance like a son-in-law who made bad investments. You have been treating him like a failed businessman. But he isn't a businessman. He is a ghost. What do you mean, a ghost? I asked, leaning forward. Graves spun his chair around. He held up a sheaf of papers printed with grainy black and white text. Lance Sterling does not exist. Not really. The LLC. He registered Sterling. Technologies is a shell. It has no employees. It has no product. It has no patents. The address is a P.O. box in the Cayman Islands. I felt a cold chill settle over me. So what is he selling? Air Graves said simply. It is a cryptocurrency scam, a classic Ponzi scheme updated for the digital age. He calls it Vaporcoin. He promised investors a 40% return in 3 months, guaranteed by an algorithm that does not exist. He has been paying the old investors with money from the new ones, shuffling cash around like a magician with a deck of cards. I looked at the papers. The numbers were staggering. Millions of dollars flowing in and out, mostly out disappearing into accounts in Belize and Switzerland. But the music stopped about 3 months ago. Graves continued tapping a finger on a spreadsheet. The new money dried up. The crypto market crashed. The investors started asking for withdrawals. And Lance didn't have the liquidity the wedding. Goldstein whispered. The realization dawned on him exactly. Graves nodded. The wedding wasn't a celebration. It was a fundraising gala. The VIPs he was so desperate to invite. The people he kicked you out for. They weren't friends. They were the marks. That man, Gentry, the one you saw at the gate, he was the whale Lance needed, Gentry to invest $2 million. That money wasn't going to buy a house or start a family. It was going to pay off the interest on the loans Lance took from the Russians. The Russians, I asked, my voice tight. Graves slid a photograph across the desk. It was a grainy surveillance shot taken outside a nightclub. It showed Lance arguing with a man who looked like a refrigerator in a leather jacket. The man had a tattoo on his neck, a spider web. Vadim Volkov Graves said, mid-level enforcer for the Brighton Beach Syndicate. Lance borrowed $500,000 from them to start this scam. He promised them double back. He hasn't paid in 4 months. They are the ones threatening to cut him up. They are the reason he is desperate. I sat back, the metal chair creaking under my weight. It all made sense, the panic. The violence, the desperation to get the deeds. He needed my warehouses not to run a business, but to sell them for cents on the dollar to pay Volkov. He was going to liquidate my life's work to save his own skin. But there is something else, Jackson Graves said. His voice dropped an octave, losing its professional detachment. He looked at me with something close to pity. You are not going to like this, tell me, I said. Graves hesitated, then picked up another stack of papers. These are emails recovered from the Sterling Technologies server. We hacked his password. It wasn't hard. He used his birthday. He handed me the stack. Read the sender. I looked at the top email. It was a response to an angry investor who was demanding their money back. The email was full of technical jargon and stalling tactics, promising that funds would be released as soon as the merger was complete. It was a lie. A professional, calculated lie. I looked at the signature block at the bottom, CFO. Brittany Vance. My hands started to shake. The paper rattled. I looked at Graves, hoping he would tell me it was a mistake that Lance had used her name. She knows Jackson. Graves said quietly, she isn't just the wife, she is the partner. She has been signing the checks. She has been fielding the complaints. She has been lying to the SEC. She is the one who cooked the books to hide the losses from the initial investors. I read the next email. It was dated 2 days ago, the night before the wedding. It was addressed to Volkov. Subject: payment schedule. Message: please give us 48 hours. My father is legally incompetent. We are in the process of securing guardianship. Once the power of attorney is signed, we will liquidate the commercial assets immediately. The warehouses are unencumbered. We can transfer the titles by Tuesday. Please do not hurt him. We will pay. I dropped the paper. It fluttered to the floor, landing near my boot. She knew. She knew about the mob. She knew about the scam. And she wasn't just a bystander. She was offering me up as a sacrifice. She was trading my life and my legacy to save her husband from the consequences of his own greed. She hadn't just slapped me. She had signed my death warrant. She is complicit, Goldstein said, his voice hard. She is looking at 20 years for wire fraud and conspiracy. Jackson. She isn't your little girl anymore. She is a felon. I closed my eyes. I saw Brittany in her white dress screaming at the gate. I saw her standing in my living room, wishing I was dead. I had raised her to be strong. I had raised her to be smart. But somewhere along the way, she had decided that being smart meant being a predator. Where are they now? I asked. Opening my eyes, the sadness was gone, replaced by a cold clarity. Graves turned back to the computer. They are moving fast, since they have the physical deeds. They don't need a bank. They need a buyer who doesn't ask questions, and they need a notary who will look the other way. Volkov, I said. Graves nodded. Volkov owns a scrapyard in Newark. It has a smelter. It is a good place to make things disappear, and it is a good place to do business off the books. We picked up a ping from Lance's phone 10 minutes ago. He is heading south on the turnpike. They are going to the warehouses, I said, standing up. They are going to show Volkov the merchandise. They are going to try to sell my buildings tonight. They can't sell them without you, Goldstein argued. You are the owner. They have the deeds, I said, and they have a forger. If they hand those papers over to Volkov, he will occupy the buildings by morning. He will bring in his crew, he will strip the copper lock out the tenants and claim he bought it fair and square. By the time we get a court order, the buildings will be gutted, shells, and Lance and Brittany will be on a plane to a non-extradition country with a bag full of cash. I looked at Butch. How many men can we get? Butch checked his watch. It is midnight, Jackson. The union guys are asleep. Wake them up, I said. Tell them Jackson Vance is calling in the markers. Tell them the cargo is being hijacked. Tell them to meet me at Warehouse 1, and tell them to bring tire irons. I turned to Graves. Send the file to the FBI. Everything, the Ponzi scheme, the emails. The mob connection. Are you sure? Jackson Goldstein asked, putting a hand on my arm. Once you send that, there is no going back. Brittany will go to prison. I looked at the email on the floor, the one where she promised to liquidate my assets, the one where she bartered with my life. She made her choice, I said. She chose the shark suit, now she has to swim. I walked out of the basement into the cool night air. The city was asleep, but I was wide awake. The sadness was a heavy stone in my gut, but the anger was the fuel that moved my legs. My daughter was a criminal, my son-in-law was a con man, and they were about to sell my empire to the Russian mob. I got into my truck. Butch climbed in the passenger seat. I started the engine. The diesel roared to life, a sound of power and reliability. Let's go, I said. We have a sale to stop. I drove toward the turnpike, the city lights fading in the rearview mirror. I wasn't driving to a wedding. I wasn't driving to a reunion. I was driving to a funeral. The funeral of my fatherhood, and I was going to make sure the right people got buried. The truck cab was quiet, except for the hum of the tires on the asphalt and the low crackle of Butch's police scanner. I stared out at the passing highway lights, watching the industrial landscape of New Jersey roll by in the dark. We were 20 minutes away from the warehouses, 20 minutes away from the confrontation that would end this nightmare. But the phone in my pocket vibrated again, breaking the silence. It was not a text. It was a call from a number I recognized immediately. It was the direct line to the fraud department at Chase Manhattan, the same bank I had called the night before to freeze Brittany's credit cards. I looked at the dashboard clock. It was 1 in the morning. Banks did not call at 1 in the morning unless the building was burning down. I answered, putting the phone on speaker so Goldstein and Butch could hear. Mr. Vance, this is Robert Thorne from the High Value Asset Team. I apologize for the late hour, but we have a red flag on your commercial holdings account, a transaction. Just tried to clear, and it triggered a level 5 security alert. I felt my stomach tighten. A level 5 meant someone was trying to move more than $1 million. Robert, I said, keeping my voice steady. I am listening. What is the transaction? We just received a wire request for $5 million, Robert said. His voice was tense, professional, but edged with panic. The funds are being drawn against a hard money loan secured by the deeds to your 3 distribution centers in Newark. The paperwork was uploaded to our portal 10 minutes ago. It includes a notarized power of attorney and a mortgage agreement signed by you. I did not sign anything. I said the words tasting like ash in my mouth. I am in a truck on the turnpike. I haven't signed a document in 3 days. I assumed as much. Mr. Vance Robert said. But that is the problem, the signature. It is perfect. It matches the signature card we have on file from 20 years ago. It matches the checks you write every month. It is identical. And Notary seal looks authentic. The lender is a private equity firm based in Shell Company in Cyprus. They are trying to wire the $5 million into an account held by Sterling Technologies, Lance S. fake company. They weren't just selling the buildings for scrap, they were leveraging them. They were taking out a high-interest loan against my property using the stolen deeds as collateral, taking the cash and leaving me with the debt. When they ran with the money, the lenders would come for my buildings, foreclosing on my life's work. Cancel it, I said. Block the wire, I have already frozen the transfer, Robert assured me. But Mr. Vance, you need to understand the legal position. The lenders have a lien now. They have a document that looks legally binding. If this turns out to be fraud, which it clearly is, we are looking at federal identity theft. The person who submitted this didn't just forge a signature. They used your social security number, your mother's maiden name, your exact home address. They knew the internal routing numbers for your commercial accounts. This wasn't a hacker, it was someone with intimate knowledge of your life. I closed my eyes, leaning my head against the cold glass of the window. Intimate knowledge. There was only one person who knew my mother's maiden name. There was only one person who had access to my old tax returns. There was only one person who had spent hours sitting at my kitchen table watching me sign checks, watching the way I looped the J in Jackson Brittany. It wasn't Lance. Lance was a con man, but he was sloppy. He wouldn't know how to replicate my signature perfectly, but Brittany did. She used to forge my signature on her report cards in high school when she got a C. I knew she did it, and I never punished her. I thought it was clever, harmless. Now that cleverness had evolved into a felony. Is there anything else, Robert? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Yes. Robert hesitated. There is one more thing. The IP address used to upload the documents. It wasn't hidden, they didn't use a VPN. It traces back to a mobile hotspot. The device name is Brittany's iPhone. The call ended, silence rushing back into the truck cab, heavier than before. I looked at Goldstein in the back seat. He looked pale, his face illuminated by the passing streetlights. She didn't just know, Jackson, Goldstein said softly. She did it. She physically executed the fraud. Identity theft. Wire. Fraud, bank fraud. That is 30 years in federal prison, Jackson. She crossed the line. She isn't just an accomplice anymore. She is the architect. I stared at the road ahead. The anger I had felt earlier, the hot rage that made me want to fight, had cooled into something solid and heavy like lead in my gut. My daughter wasn't a victim of a bad marriage. She wasn't a girl led astray by a charismatic husband. She was a criminal. She had looked at her father, the man who worked double shifts to buy her first car, the man who paid for her college, the man who was ironing his suit for her wedding, and she saw nothing but a signature to be forged and an asset to be liquidated. She had stolen my identity, not just my financial identity, but my identity as her father. She had erased me, replacing me with a fake signature on a loan document so she could run away with a thief. Butch gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles white. Jackson, he said, his voice low. What do you want to do? The police are already looking for them. But if we catch them at the warehouse before the cops do... He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. We all knew what the union guys would do if they found Lance and Brittany stripping the buildings. We knew what the Russian mob would do if they found out the $5 million loan had been frozen. I thought about Brittany. I thought about the little girl in pigtails asking for ice cream, I thought about the woman in the white dress screaming at me to die. I realized then that the little girl was gone. She had died a long time ago, replaced by this stranger with a phone full of banking apps and a heart full of greed. "Keep driving," I said. My voice was cold, unrecognizable even to myself. "We aren't calling the cops yet, and we aren't waiting for the bank. We are going to the warehouse, but why?" Goldstein asked. "If the money is frozen, they can't leave because I said." Looking at the GPS screen counting down the miles. "They don't know the money is frozen yet. They think they just scored $5 million. They are celebrating. And I want to be the one to tell them that the check bounced. I want to look her in the eye when she realizes she sold her soul for nothing." And there was something else, something I didn't say to Goldstein. If Volkov, the Russian mobster, was there meeting them to collect his money, he would be expecting payment. If the money didn't show up, Lance and Brittany would be in a room with the monster and no way out. I needed to get there, not to save them, but to ensure that justice was served by the law, not by a meat cleaver. I was done protecting her from the world. But I wasn't going to let the mob kill her. She belonged to the FBI now, she belonged to a cell block, and I was going to be the one to hand her over. "Step on it, Butch," I said. "The warehouse is 10 miles out. I want to be there before the celebration ends." Butch nodded and the truck surged forward, the engine roaring. The city was behind us. The industrial wasteland of the shipyards lay ahead. A landscape of steel and concrete and shadows. It was fitting, it was where I made my fortune. And tonight, it was where my family would end. The truck tires crunched on gravel as we pulled off the main highway and onto the service road leading to the industrial park. The air here was thicker, heavy with the smell of diesel and the metallic tang of the nearby refineries. The warehouses loomed out of the darkness. Massive concrete monoliths sitting silent under the pale moonlight. Warehouse 1 was the largest, a cavernous space I had built 20 years ago to handle overflow from the port. It was my flagship. And now it was the stage for my daughter's final act of betrayal. I checked my phone again. The security alert was still flashing on the screen, unauthorized access loading Dock B. But it wasn't T, just a door sensor anymore. The perimeter cameras were active. I tapped the screen, pulling up the live feed. The image was grainy green tinted night vision, but clear enough. There were 3 cars parked by the loading bay. 2 black SUVs and Lance S. white Range Rover. I zoomed in, figures were moving around the cars, men in dark coats smoking cigarettes. They weren't Tesla investors. They were muscle. The way they stood relaxed but alert, watching the perimeter, told me everything I needed to know. These were Volkov's men. And there in the middle of them was Lance. He was gesturing at the building, waving his arms, talking fast. Next to him, wrapped in a coat that looked too big for her, was Brittany. She was looking at the building. She was looking at her phone, probably checking the bank account, waiting for the $5 million that would never arrive. "They are inside the fence," Butch said, looking at my phone over my shoulder. "They cut the chain." "They didn't just cut the chain," I said, watching as Lance led the group toward the side door. He had a set of keys. Keys. He must have taken from my office when they stole the safe. He was giving them the grand tour, showing them the merchandise, proving he had access. I looked at the time. It was 1:30 in the morning. The police were still miles away, dealing with the paperwork of a fraud report. If I called them now, they would arrive in 20 minutes, sirens blazing. By then, Volkov would be gone, slipping away into the shadows, leaving Lance holding the bag. Or worse, leaving Lance and Brittany dead on the floor as a warning to anyone else who wasted his time. "We can wait for the cops," I said. My voice was steady, but my heart was hammering against my ribs. If Volkov realizes the money isn't coming, if he checks his accounts and sees the transfer was blocked, he is going to kill them right there in the parking lot. Goldstein leaned forward from the back seat. "Oxen, you can go in there alone. Those are professional killers. You have a tire iron. They have Glocks. I am not going in alone, I said. I reached for the CB radio mounted under the dashboard. It was old analog technology in a digital world, but on the docks it was still the primary language I picked up. The mic, the coiled cord stretching out. Breaker 19, this is Jackson Vance. Does anyone copy? Static hissed, then a voice cut through, deep and rough, loud and clear. Go ahead, Jackson. This is Big Mike. We thought you retired. I am retired, Mike. But I have a situation at Warehouse 1. I have hijackers on the premises. Russian crew, they are trying to move the cargo. Hijackers, the word was magic on the radio. In the world of logistics, hijacking wasn't just a crime. It was a personal insult. It meant someone was messing with the livelihood of every driver on the road. We are 10 minutes out, Jackson. How many? 6 hostiles, I said, plus 2 civilians. I need a blockade. Mike, I need you to seal the exits. No one leaves until I say so. Copy that, Jackson. We are rolling. The cavalry is coming. I put the mic back. I looked at Butch. He was smiling, a grim, wolfish smile. The union guys, he said. They never forget a favor. No, I said. They don't too. We watched the screen. Lance was opening the side door. He ushered Volkov inside. The rest of the men followed, leaving one guard by the cars. They were going in to inspect the property to make sure it was empty, to make sure it was worth the trouble. This is it, I said, turning to Butch. Drive us in, but keep the lights off. I want to get to the main breaker box before they realize we are here. Butch nodded, shifting the truck into gear. We rolled forward the engine, a low rumble lost in the ambient noise of the industrial park. We slipped through the broken gate, gliding like a shark through dark water. I wasn't just a father anymore. I wasn't just a victim, I was the operator. And I was about to close the biggest deal of my life. The truck came to a stop 50 yards from the loading dock, hidden in the shadow of a container stack. I got out, clutching the tire iron, my hand molding to the cold steel. Butch grabbed a heavy maglite. Goldstein stayed in the truck, his phone ready to dial 911. The moment the shooting started, we moved toward the building, sticking to the shadows. The guard by the cars was smoking, looking at his phone. He didn't see us, he didn't hear us. We were ghosts in our own house. I reached the external breaker box. It was locked, but I had the master key. I opened the panel, I looked at the switches, the main power, the security lights, the internal floods. It was all there, control at my fingertips. I looked at Butch. Ready, he nodded. I reached up and killed the main power. The warehouse plunged into absolute darkness. The security lights died. The hum of the ventilation fans stopped. Silence rushed in, heavy and sudden. Then I flipped the switch for the internal emergency floods. These weren't normal lights. They were high-intensity halogens designed to blind intruders, aimed directly at the center of the warehouse floor. Inside, I heard a shout of surprise, then a scream. It was Lance. I slammed the panel shut. Let us go, I said. We ran toward the side door. Butch kicked it open. We stepped into the blinding light of the warehouse floor. Lance Brittany Volkov and his men were standing in the center of the room, shielding their eyes against the sudden glare. They looked like rats caught in a spotlight. Lance squinted, trying to see who had interrupted his sale. "Who is that?" he screamed. "Who is there?" I stepped forward, the tire iron heavy in my hand. The light was behind me, casting a long shadow that stretched across the concrete floor, right to his feet. "It is the landlord." "Lance," I said. My voice echoed in the vast, empty space. "Rent is due." And then from outside came the sound of air horns, 1, then 2, then a dozen, the roar of diesel engines, the screech of air brakes. The union had arrived. The exits were sealed. The trap was sprung, and now it was time to see what I had caught. The silence in the warehouse was heavy, broken only by the hum of the high-intensity halogen lights I had just activated. They buzzed like angry hornets bathing the concrete floor in a stark, clinical white glare that left no shadows to hide in. Lance raised a hand to shield his eyes, squinting against the brightness, his face a mask of panic and confusion. Brittany stood beside him, shivering in her oversized coat, her eyes darting between me and the men surrounding them, Volkov. The Russian mobster didn't flinch. He just stood there, hands in the pockets of his leather jacket, looking at me with the cold calculation of a man who was used to interruptions. "Who are you?" Volkov asked. His voice was deep, accented, and dangerously calm. He ignored the tire iron in my hand. He ignored Butch, standing beside me with the flashlight. He looked only at my eyes, assessing the threat. "Level, I am the owner of this building," I said, stepping fully into the pool of light. My voice echoed off the steel rafters. "I am the man whose name is on the deed, and I am the man whose signature was forged to bring you here tonight." Lance stepped forward, desperate to regain control of the narrative. He was sweating profusely, the moisture beading on his forehead and running down his nose. "Don't listen to him, Mr. Volkov," he shouted, his voice cracking. "He is my father-in-law. He is sick. He has dementia. We discussed this. He doesn't know where he is. He wanders. He gets aggressive. Just ignore him. We have the papers. The deal is still good. I can sign the transfer right now. Just give me the cash and the building is yours." He was trying to sell a $15 million asset for a bag of cash in the middle of the night, just to save his own skin. It was pathetic, it was desperate, and it was over. I walked past Lance, ignoring him completely. I walked toward a control panel mounted on a structural pillar in the center of the room. This was a modern logistics hub. It wasn't just concrete and steel, it was wired for data. Above us, suspended from the ceiling, was a massive LED display screen, usually used to track shipping containers and display inventory metrics. It was currently dark, a black rectangle hanging like a guillotine blade. "Butch," I said, "keep them back." Butch stepped forward, leveling the heavy maglite like a baton. "Stay where you are," he growled at Volkov's men. They hesitated, looking to their boss for a signal. Volkov held up a hand, waiting. He wanted to see how this played out. I reached the control panel. I pulled the burner phone from my pocket and plugged it into the system via a USB cable. I had preloaded the files Graves had sent me. The evidence, the truth, I typed in the command code. The screen above us flickered to life, pixels dancing, until they formed a crisp, high-definition image. "Look up." "Lance," I said, "look at your legacy." The screen displayed a document. It wasn't a deed. It wasn't a contract. It was an FBI bulletin, a sealed indictment that Graves had pulled from a federal database using backdoors that shouldn't exist. The photo on the document was Lance S. It was his driver, license photo, smiling, arrogant, untouchable. Next to it were the charges: wire fraud, money laundering, securities fraud, grand larceny. Lance looked up. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. The color drained from his face, leaving him looking like a corpse in a tuxedo. "You aren't a businessman, Lance," I said, my voice amplified by the acoustics of the empty space. "You are a fugitive. The FBI has been building a case against your Ponzi scheme for 6 months. They know about the fake investors. They know about the offshore accounts. And they know about the $2 million you owe Mr. Volkov." Volkov turned his head slowly to look at Lance. The calm calculation in his eyes was replaced by a flicker of interest. Dangerous interest. "You told me you were solvent," Volkov said softly. "You told me the feds were not involved. You said this was a private liquidation." "It is private," Lance stammered, backing away, his hands raised. "I can fix this. The indictment isn't public yet. We can still do the deal. The building is worth $15 million. I am selling it to you for $2 million. It is a steal." I tapped the phone screen again. The image changed. This time it was a bank record, a transfer receipt showing the movement of funds from my personal savings account into a shell company registered to Brittany Vance. Then another image, a forensic analysis of the loan application, showing the IP address of Brittany's phone used to forge my signature. "And this," I said, looking at my daughter, "is how they planned to pay you. They were going to mortgage a building they don't own, take the cash and run, leaving you with a property that is about to be seized by the federal government as proceeds of a crime." I turned to Volkov. "If you buy this building tonight, You aren't buying an asset. You are buying an obstruction of justice charge the moment. You sign that paper. You become an accessory to federal bank fraud. The FBI is tracking Lance S. phone. They are tracking Brittany. Phone, they know you are here. Volkov looked at the screen, then at me. He was a businessman in his own dark way. He understood risk versus reward. He looked at the building, the massive empty space that was supposed to be his payout. You are telling me, Volkov said, his voice heavy with menace, that this man brought me here to sell me stolen property while he is under federal investigation. Yes, I said. And the $5 million loan he promised to wire to my account in Cyprus. Blocked, I said. I froze it 2 hours ago. The money doesn't exist. Volkov turned to Lance entirely now. The air in the room changed. It became charged electric with violence. Lance realized it too. He looked at the exits, but Volkov's men had fanned out, blocking the path to the cars. He looked at Brittany, but she was useless, paralyzed by the image of her own crime projected on a 20-foot screen. Mr. Volkov. Lance squeaked his voice an octave higher. Please. He is lying. He is trying to scare you. I have the deeds. Look. I have the paper. He pulled the stolen deeds from his jacket pocket, waving them like a white flag. Volkov snatched the papers from his hand. He didn't look at them. He tore them in half, then in half again. He let the pieces flutter to the concrete floor like confetti. Paper is paper, Volkov said. You wasted my time, Lance. You wasted my resources, and you lied to me. In my world, lying is expensive. Lance fell to his knees. It wasn't a choice, his legs just gave out. He was sobbing now, the arrogant veneer completely stripped away. Please, he begged, clutching at Volkov's coat. Please don't kill me, I will get the money, I will find another way. Just give me time. Time, Volkov laughed. It was a dark, humorless sound. You are out of time, the feds are watching. You have no money. You have no assets. You have nothing. Volkov reached into his jacket. I tensed, gripping the tire iron, but he didn't pull out a gun. He pulled out a phone. He looked at it, then looked at me. You say the police are coming, he asked. They are on their way, I lied. The union is already outside, blocking the road. You are trapped, Volkov nodded. He made a decision. He wasn't going to go down for a 2-bit con man. He gestured to his men. They stepped away from the cars, moving toward the side exit. The one I had come in through. We are leaving, Volkov said. He looked at Lance, huddled on the floor. This is your mess. You clean it up. But if I ever see you again. Lance, if you ever come near my business or my family, I will not be so polite. Volkov looked at me one last time. He touched 2 fingers to his forehead in a mocking salute, giving respect to the player who had outmaneuvered him. Then he and his men vanished into the shadows, slipping out the side door into the night, leaving Lance and Brittany alone with me. The warehouse was silent again, save for the sound of Lance's sweeping. I unplugged my phone. The screen above went dark, plunging us back into the stark white light of the halogen floods. I walked over to where Lance was kneeling. Brittany was standing a few feet away, hugging herself, shaking uncontrollably. She looked at me, and for the first time I saw fear, real fear in her eyes, not the annoyance of a daughter dealing with an embarrassing father, but the terror of a criminal looking at a judge. You saved us, she whispered. Her voice was trembling. You got rid of them, you saved our lives. I looked at her, I looked at the daughter who had forged my signature, who had tried to sell my life down the river. I felt a deep, profound exhaustion settle into my bones. I didn't save you. Brittany, I said, my voice flat. From outside, the sound of sirens began to wail, growing louder. With every second, blue and red lights began to flash against the high windows, reflecting off the steel beams. I didn't call the police to save you, I said. Looking at the doors as the heavy thud of battering rams hit the metal, I called them. To arrest you. The main cargo doors rolled up with a screech of metal, revealing a fleet of police cruisers and FBI SUVs in the parking lot. Agents in windbreakers swarmed the entrance, guns drawn. Lance looked up, his face streaked with tears. Dad, he whispered. Please help us. I turned my back on them. I walked toward the side exit, toward the darkness, toward the fresh air. I am not your dad, I said over my shoulder. I am the witness, and I am done testifying. I stopped at the edge of the loading dock, my hand resting on the cold steel of the doorframe. I did not walk out into the night, not yet. I turned back one last time to watch the house of cards collapse. I needed to see it. I needed to witness the moment. Reality finally crashed into the fantasy world my daughter and her husband had built. Inside the circle of blinding halogen light, the dynamic had shifted with terrifying speed. Volkov was no longer looking at the screen displaying the FBI indictment. He was looking at Lance. And the look on his face was not anger, it was disgust. The kind of look a man gives to a cockroach before he crushes it. You brought me here to a federal trap, Volkov said. His voice low, but carrying clearly in the cavernous acoustic of the warehouse. You wasted my time. You insulted my intelligence, and you tried to pay me with a building you do not own. Lance scrambled backward on his hands and knees, his tuxedo pants tearing on the rough concrete. No, please, Mr. Volkov. I didn't know Jackson set me up. He is the one you want. He is the one who called them. Volkov didn't even glance in my direction. He knew who the real enemy was. He took a step forward and kicked Lance in the ribs. It wasn't a movie kick. It was a brutal, efficient strike calculated to break bone. I heard the crack echo off the walls, followed by a wet, wheezing scream from Lance. He curled into a fetal ball, clutching his side, vomiting bile onto the floor. You owe me $2 million, Volkov said calmly, adjusting his leather jacket. And now you owe me for the lawyers I will need to hire to explain why I am standing in a warehouse with a fraud. Volkov raised his boot again, ready to finish the job, ready to stomp the life out of the man who had dragged him into this mess. Brittany screamed, a high piercing sound of pure terror, pressing herself against a structural pillar, her hands over her mouth. But the boot never came down. The side doors of the warehouse, the ones I had left unbarred, exploded inward with a concussive boom. At the same moment, the main cargo bay doors began to rise, grinding on their tracks, revealing a wall of flashing red and blue lights that cut through the darkness outside. Federal agents, drop your weapons, get on the ground, now! The voice was amplified, booming from a megaphone. It was the sound of absolute authority. The warehouse swarmed. Men in windbreakers with yellow FBI lettering poured in from every angle, moving with military precision, rifles raised, lights mounted on their barrels, cutting through the gloom. Volkov didn't run. He was a professional. He knew when the game was over. He simply raised his hands, interlacing his fingers behind his head, and knelt on the concrete looking bored. His men followed suit, dropping their guns, kicking them away, surrendering to the inevitable. But Lance didn't surrender. He panicked. He saw the agents. He saw the mobsters, and his brain snapped. He scrambled to his feet, blood dripping from his mouth, and tried to run. He didn't run toward the exit. He ran toward the back of the warehouse, toward the office, toward the hole in the floor where the safe used to be, as if he could dive into it and hide. He made it 10 feet. An agent tackled him from the side, hitting him like a linebacker. Lance hit the floor hard, his face bouncing off the cement. 2 more agents were on him instantly, knees in his back, zip ties cinching his wrists tight. Get off me, Lance screamed, spitting blood. I'm a victim. He attacked me. My father-in-law is crazy. Ask him. He is the criminal. The agents ignored him, hauling him to his feet. He couldn't stand straight, his ribs likely broken, so they dragged him, his expensive shoes scuffing uselessly against the floor. They marched him past Volkov, who watched him go with a cold sneer. They marched him past me. Lance looked at me as he went by. His eyes were wide, filled with shock and pain. Jackson, tell them I am family. I said nothing. I just watched him disappear out the door into the waiting custody of the federal government. Then the room went quiet. The agents secured the perimeter, checking corners, gathering evidence. One team moved toward the pillar where Brittany was standing. She hadn't moved. She was frozen, staring at the spot where her husband had been beaten and arrested. An agent, a woman with a stern face and a clipboard, approached her. Brittany Vance. Brittany blinked, coming out of her trance. She straightened her coat, trying to regain some shred of dignity, trying to summon the arrogance that had served her so well for so long. Yes, that is me. I am a victim here. My husband dragged me into this. I didn't know anything. I want to go home. The agent didn't smile. She didn't offer a blanket or a cup of coffee. She pulled a pair of handcuffs from her belt. Ma, you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit bank fraud, identity theft, wire fraud, and money laundering. Turn around and place your hands behind your back. No. Brittany gasped, backing away, hitting the pillar. You can't arrest me. I am the CFO, but I didn't know. I just signed what he told me to sign. I am Jackson Vance's daughter. My father is right there. Ask him, he will tell you. I am a good person. The agent moved fast, spinning Brittany around and clicking the cuffs onto her wrists. The sound was sharp, final. Brittany shrieked, struggling against the metal, trying to pull away, trying to twist her body to face me. Daddy, she screamed, the word tearing out of her throat. Daddy, help me. Tell them, make them stop. You have money. You know people, call the lawyers, fix this. I stepped out. Shadows, then walking slowly toward the center of the room. My boots echoed on the floor. Goldstein walked beside me, silent and grim. We stopped 10 feet from where the agent was holding my daughter. Brittany saw me and she stopped fighting. She slumped, looking small and broken in the grip of the law. Her eyes locked onto mine, searching for the father who had always fixed her mistakes, who had always paid her bills, who had always protected her from the rain. Daddy, please, she sobbed, tears streaming down her face, ruining her makeup, making her look like a terrifying clown. I am sorry. I'm sorry about the wedding, I am sorry about the house. I made a mistake, but you can't let them take me to prison. I am your daughter. I am your little girl. Pay the bail, Daddy. Get the lawyers. Get Goldstein. He is right there. She looked at Goldstein, her eyes lighting up with a desperate hope. Mr. Goldstein, you represent us, right? You represent the family. Tell them this is a mistake. Tell them my father authorizes the loan. Tell them I had permission to sign his name. Goldstein looked at her. He adjusted his glasses, his face a mask of stone. He didn't look at her with anger. He looked at her with the professional detachment of a coroner examining a corpse. I represent Jackson Vance, Goldstein said, his voice dry and clear. I do not represent you, Mrs. Sterling, and I certainly do not represent the Sterling Technologies crime family. Brittany flinched, as if he had hit her. But Daddy, she pleaded, looking back to me, you can hire him for me. You have to. You can't let me go to jail. And I am scared. Daddy, please, I will do anything. I will sign whatever you want. Just get me out of this. I looked at her. I looked at the woman who had forged my signature, who had tried to mortgage my legacy, who had stood by while her husband planned to put me in an asylum. I remembered the way she looked at me in my living room, the hatred in her eyes when she wished I was dead. I walked closer until I was just a foot away. The agent tensed, but didn't stop me. I looked deep into Brittany's eyes, searching for anything real, searching for a shred of remorse that wasn't born of fear. But all I saw was calculation. All I saw was a predator who had been caught in a trap and was trying to chew her own leg off to escape. You want a lawyer, Brittany? I asked softly. Yes, Daddy, yes, please. I nodded slowly. You need a lawyer. You are facing 30 years. The evidence is overwhelming. They have the IP address, Brittany. They have the metadata from your phone. They have the emails you sent to Volkov, bartering with my life. I didn't mean it, she wailed. It was just talk. It wasn't talk, I said. It was a transaction. And now the bill is due. I signaled to Goldstein. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a thick file folder. He handed it to the FBI agent holding Brittany's arm. "What is that?" Brittany asked, her eyes darting between the folder and my face. "That I said is the witness file. It contains the forensic accounting of every dollar you stole from me. For the last 5 years, it contains the affidavit from the bank regarding the forgery, and it contains a sworn statement from me testifying that I never gave you permission to sign my name, not for a report card, and certainly not for a $5 million loan." Brittany went pale, her mouth opening and closing soundlessly. "Goldstein is not going to defend you." "Brittany," I said, my voice hard as the concrete floor. "He is the prosecution's star witness, and so am I. We aren't here to bail you out. We are here to make sure you never get out, Daddy." "No," she whispered the word, barely a breath. "Don't call me that," I said, turning my back on her. "You lost the right to that name when you sold it to a loan shark." I walked away. The agent began to drag her toward the exit. Brittany started to scream again, a raw, primal sound of abandonment slamming against the steel walls of the warehouse. "Daddy! Daddy! Don't leave me, I am sorry. I love you. Daddy, come back." I kept walking. I walked out of the warehouse, past the police cars, past the ambulance where they were treating Lance, past the chaos. I walked into the cool night air, where Butch was waiting by the truck. I didn't look back. I didn't cry. The part of me that could cry for her was dead, killed by 1,000 cuts of betrayal. I climbed into the truck and closed the door, shutting out the sound of her screaming. "Let's go, Butch," I said. "Take me home." The engine roared to life and we drove away, leaving the wreckage of my family in the rearview mirror, illuminated by the flashing lights of justice. It was over. The wedding was canceled, the business was closed, and I was finally free. The Atlantic Ocean is a different kind of beast compared to the concrete jungle of the New Jersey shipyards. It does not care about leverage or margins or fraud. It just breathes a rhythmic, endless cycle of tides that washes everything clean. I sat in the fighting chair on the stern of my new 40-foot Viking convertible, the sun warming my face, the salt spray stiffening my hair. I was holding a fishing rod, not a tire iron, and for the first time in 6 months my hands were perfectly steady. I reeled in the line, checking the bait. It was quiet out here. The only sound was the slap of water against the hull and the cry of a seagull circling overhead. It was the kind of peace money couldn't buy, but it certainly helped to rent the view. I put the rod in the holder and picked up my glass. It wasn't the cheap bourbon I used to drink alone in the dark. It was a vintage Bordeaux, smooth and rich. I took a sip, savoring the taste of freedom. The warehouses were gone. I sold them 3 months ago. Not to a mobster in the middle of the night, but to a global logistics conglomerate in a boardroom with 20 lawyers. The final sale price was $18 million. It was more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes, but I didn't keep it. Not really. I kept enough for the boat, enough for a small condo on the coast, and enough to ensure I never had to iron an old suit again. The rest, $15 million, went into a trust. A very specific, irrevocable trust. It was the seed money for the Sarah Vance Foundation, named after my late wife. It wasn't a charity for the arts or a tax shelter. It was a legal defense fund, specifically designed to provide high-end representation for seniors facing financial exploitation by their families. We hired the best sharks in the business, lawyers like Goldstein, to hunt down children who stole from their parents. I like to think Sarah would have approved. She always hated a bully. My phone sitting on the teak table next to the wine cooler began to buzz. It vibrated aggressively, dancing across the polished wood, breaking the silence. I looked at the screen. It was a blocked number. I knew who it was. I knew exactly who it was because it was Tuesday. And Tuesday was the day inmates at the Federal Correctional Institution in Danbury were allowed their phone privileges. I stared at the phone, watching it ring. The screen flashed incoming call. Federal Bureau of Prisons, do you wish to accept? I pictured her, Brittany, sitting in a beige jumpsuit in a common room surrounded by cinder blocks, holding a plastic receiver to her ear, waiting for Daddy to pick up, waiting for Daddy to fix it, to send money for the commissary, to tell her it was all going to be okay. She had pleaded guilty eventually. The evidence was too overwhelming. Goldstein didn't defend her. He testified against her, calmly laying out the paper trail of her betrayal. She got 8 years. Lance got 15. They were divorced now, not by choice, but by the separation of cell blocks. The phone kept ringing, persistent, desperate. I thought about answering. I thought about picking it up and hearing her voice asking her if she had met any important people in there, asking her if the aesthetic of the prison met her standards. But then I looked out at the horizon, where the blue water met the blue sky. I looked at the fishing rod, bending slightly, as something deep below took an interest in the bait. I didn't reach for the phone. I reached for my wine. I took another sip, watching the screen light up one last time before going dark. The call went to voicemail, where it would sit unheard, deleted by the system in 30 days. I wasn't angry anymore. Anger is too heavy to carry on a boat. I was just done. The father she knew was gone, replaced by this man who preferred the company of the ocean. The reel started to click, the line singing, as a fish ran with the hook. I stood up, grabbing the rod, feeling the weight of the fight. Lance had said he only wanted important people at his wedding. He was right. It is important to know who matters. And as I set the hook and began to reel in my catch, I realized that for the first time in a long time, the most important person in my life was me. And that was enough. I learned that family is not defined by DNA, but by loyalty and respect. For years, I thought being a good father meant giving without limits, but I was wrong. Love without boundaries is just enabling. My daughter taught me a painful truth, that some people love you for what you provide, not for who you are. When the money stops, their love stops too. Real importance isn't found in a VIP guest list or a bank account balance. It is found in the peace of knowing you stood up for yourself. You are never too old to demand respect, and you are never too old to walk away from those who refuse to give it. What would you have done in my place? Would you have picked up that phone call from prison? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed seeing justice served, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more stories of truth and retribution. See you in the next story.